You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The City of Los Angeles says it will appeal a ruling by the city's Employee Relations Board rescinding $40 billion in unilateral pension cuts imposed on new hires. The Employee Relations Board ruled it was an unlawful cut made without collective bargaining. Cheryl Parisi is AFSCME District Council 36 Executive Director and also Chair of the Coalition of LA City Unions.
We hope that the city makes a decision to abide by the law and abide by the ruling of the city's Employee Relations Board. That is our hope, rather than reverting to the courts.
Parisi says that the unions reopened their contract a couple of years ago and agreed to pay more out of pocket for their pensions, but the city then unilaterally imposed new pension changes on new hires, arguing they have the legal authority to do that without bargaining.
We thought it was a false legal theory and challenged that the Employee Relations Board. And ultimately, after months of hearings and review, the hearing officer issued her report, and the Employee Relations Board upheld that report and found that, in fact, changes to the pension plan were a mandatory subject of bargaining because the pension plan was adopted in violation of the law, ordered that the terms of the prior pension plan be reinstituted.
The unions are currently in contract negotiations with the city. The unions represent some 20,000 Los Angeles city workers. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is on a mission to cut the pensions of public workers there, but complete details on what he wants to do haven't yet been made public. Raising the retirement age for public workers again, as he did in 2011, is one thing he wants to do. Despite signing a law to require the payments, Christie shortchanged the public pensions system by $2.4 billion in promised payments this year. Christie claims New Jersey might end up bankrupt, like Detroit, as he put it, if the state is forced obligation to pay pensions already earned by public workers. Hetty Rosenstein is New Jersey Director for the Communications Workers of America.
These are not Cadillac benefits. These are modest pension plans that are being paid for between 55 and 65% by the employees themselves, by their contributions. These payments are very large for the state to make. We can't deny that. But by not making the payments, they're making them large.
The Wisconsin governor's race is in a dead heat as Democrat Mary Burke takes on Wisconsin's union-busting governor Scott Walker. So if Burke is able to unseat Walker, what does that mean for public worker collective bargaining rights in Wisconsin? Burke told the Milwaukee supports, quote, the right of public employees to collectively bargain and will work to restore that right, end quote. She says the employee out-of-pocket contributions to health care and pension plans that are in the Anti-Union Law, Act 10, could have been achieved through collective bargaining. If elected governor of Wisconsin, Burke says she would work to repeal parts of Act 10, like annual union recertification elections and the ban on automatic dues collections. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this town is my town. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to. All kinds of stuff happening in D.C., around the country. Keith Ellison and Representative Lewis, as we speak, laying out the Employee Empowerment Act. Today on the program, I'm going to talk to a couple of people who were there, a couple of people who were maybe on the dais talking about how this would affect their lives. I think this is a huge step in the right direction. It's not going to pass. No way in a cold day in Haiti with this legislature in Washington, but it's going to spur some discussion. And it, to me, is the kind of legislation that goes, we can actually influence things to make people's lives better. And that's huge. And it'll give people something to vote for come November. It'll give workers the ability to go to their Republicans or their Democrats or their independents and go, where are you on this? This will affect my life. So much of what we see being talked about in politics doesn't affect us in the slightest. This, most certainly, could affect a large number of working people, not just low-wage workers, but workers all the way through the economy. So we're going to talk about that. Also, some new NLRB decisions that I think moving us in the right direction. Senator Dalen Leach will be here to talk about the pension situation here in Pennsylvania. Also, his trip to Colorado. Maybe a little bit about medical marijuana and the hope of that some reasonable legislation pops out of that. Also, your thoughts, your questions, your comments, whatever's on your mind. You can always call us 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425, or hit me up via email, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or on the Twitters @RickSmithShow. So the first thing grabbed my attention. It's election year. One of those things you need to add to your election year calendar. Mark today down. Today's the day. If you remember the Mitt Romney comment that, never heard of such a thing of giving companies tax breaks to move overseas. Never heard of it. In 20 years of business, don't know what you're talking about. Well, he's wrong. And as you've seen the Walgreens story these last couple of weeks, this tax inversion stuff, well, the Senate put through a piece of legislation today that would have ended those tax breaks. No more deducting the expenses from moving overseas. No more of that. It'd be over. And on the other side of it, ending those credits, it would give companies who want to come back incentives, tax credits, and some sweeteners to come back to the U.S. That was filibustered. And look, when the Democrats are the majority party in the Senate, there's only one party that's filibustering, and that's the Republicans. Again, they're calling it an election year stunt, and I don't see it as an election year stunt. I see it as, we should have done this 2 years ago, should have done this 3 years ago, should have done this 5 years, should have done it 10 years ago. Well, actually, it should have never happened. I mean, that's the other part of this. That what goes on in Washington and in Harrisburg too often is for the benefit of these big companies, not small businesses like the Republic. Oh, you're going to hurt small business. No, it's going to have very little to do with them. They're the ones who are hurt by these huge companies being able to manipulate the laws and the regulations in their favor. We've been hearing about deregulation for more than 30 years now. My entire life has been nothing but, we need to deregulate. Yet, I don't see us doing away with anything. I see us changing things an awful lot to harm small businesses, to harm the little guy, to screw communities, and for the big multinationals to do really very well, thank you very much. But I just don't see the regulations going away. Like trucking deregulation. Did trucking deregulation, did that help? Or did it hurt? I guess it depends on who you're talking about. The workers got screwed, and in a big way, because those were actually at one point very living wage jobs. Now you've got people who, and people that I know, friends that I've known for years, who are struggling. They're working at basically minimum wage jobs sometimes because, well, maybe there's no load and they're stuck somewhere for a day, 2, 3. So I look at the deregulation as, well, we got screwed again. And this, again, another example of our senators, our Republican senators, who are, well, fully in the back pocket of corporate America. So there you go. There's my first thought. Second thought, today is the 49th anniversary of Lyndon Baines Johnson signing the Social Security Act of 1965 that established Medicare and Medicaid. It's been 49 years. And you see the picture of, with Lyndon Baines Johnson sitting there right next to Harry S. Truman, which I always love the S because he didn't actually have a middle name. But sitting there next to Truman, signing it off, because Truman was the first person to say we needed national health care. We needed a national health care system. And if you look at our national health care system, Medicare, which is doing much better thanks to Obamacare. And again, I go back to this whole idea. I don't know why we have so many different systems. Why we can't just go, you know what, Medicare works pretty well. In fact, it's doing really well. I saw a number the other day. It said they've seen about almost 2 million more patients and spent less money because they've gone and they've taken the abuse out. They've squeezed the abuse and the fraud and all the stuff out of it, and they're working to make it better. More people are getting access, and it's actually costing less because we're holding premiums down. I know the Republicans and the haters, the Obama haters, are saying, "Oh, next year, I'll tell you, next year it's going to go up." And you know what it's going to be the year after? Well, if it did happen this year, it'll be next year. You wait, it's going to be next year. Kind of like they've done for the last 49 years in attacking Medicare. Because remember, you had a party of people and an ideology of people who were against it. The corporatists not happy. And here we are 49 years later, and it's working. Very much so working. And if you look at the 2014 Medicare Trustee Report, there was an interesting chart in there that showed how much Medicare actuaries expected to save thanks to Obamacare. And, it's a pretty big number. I mean, you're talking about 1.5%, which could add up to, like $250 billion a year by 2080. You're talking about a huge amount of money that, we could be spending on more health care. Now, just think if we would have put everybody into that system, which is what I had thought would have been a really great idea. But happy 49th birthday, Medicare and Medicaid. Let's hope that the Republicans and the haters don't get their way. Now, they're working on it. Because I don't know if you've seen it, I have signed up. That's right, I've signed one of the first, I don't know, like 200 people. I've signed up for Reagan Book. Yeah, I know. Why are you supporting the crazies? I got to see this. Now they call themselves a pro-family group, which I find utterly ludicrous. That one of these groups would call themselves a pro-family group. Maybe their narrowly defined definition of what a family is, I'll give them that. Narrowly defined, insaniac definition of family, I'll get that. I'll give them that. But the idea that they're pro-family is ludicrous. The group's name, Faith to Action. Last week they announced that they were going to kick off the Reagan Book. And they say it's going to be bigger than Facebook because crazy people like them are going to come to it and sign up. And then people like me who want to see the craziness, because you can't leave these people unchecked. They're not well. So the complaint is, and I don't know, to be honest with you, if Facebook kicks people off for their political ideology. I don't think so, because I share my political ideology often on my Facebook page. I think maybe you can be kicked off for being an idiot, for being overly offensive. There's free speech, yes, and then there's destructive speech, which I guess you could say, well, is protected as well. I don't know. Do you want people who are just going to be pushing send, and screwing the whole system? I don't know. Right now, as I looked at it, there were about 1,100 people who signed up, of which I was one of them. Now, here's the part that gets me, and this is the funny part. I signed up for it, and it took me like a half an hour because it was so slow, and there couldn't be more than 5 people on it. And this is why I'm going. I said on Twitter, I go, these are the very people who complained about Obamacare's website, who was struggling to handle the millions of uninsured people who were clamoring to it. And that system had problems. They can't get a system to run that has 5 people trying to sign up for it at once. So I'm expecting major failure, but I'm going to be there every step of the way, so you don't have to. I've signed up, so you don't have to, and I'm going to come back and report my Reagan book account to everybody else. Should be quite cute. Quick break. Right back.
Them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. Argentinian officials are meeting with a court-appointed mediator in New York today to try and strike a deal that would prevent the country from defaulting on its national debt for the second time in 12 years. At the tail end of Argentina's financial crisis in the early 2000s, its sovereign bonds sold for cheap on international markets. By 2005, cash-strapped Argentina proposed a debt restructuring to those bond investors. Many accepted the deal, but a portion of investors are still holding out.
There are still about 8% of the bondholders that have never been satisfied with 25 or 30 cents on the dollar. They want to be paid much closer to the face value of the debt that they hold. And they've been pursuing Argentina in the courts since 2005 in New York.
Brett House teaches economics at McGill University and is an expert in sovereign debt restructuring at the Center for International Governance Innovation. In June, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear out an Argentinian appeal to delay paying its creditors, leading to the countdown to potential default on Thursday.
Argentina has to pay those holdout creditors at the same time as it makes payments on the restructured debt. If it doesn't do both, then it's in essentially a default situation and in contempt of court.
Argentina's remaining creditors are often referred to as vulture funds, the suggestion being that they prey on poor countries or are unreasonable in resisting settlement. But House says the term distorts the reality of a healthy sovereign debt market, in which both lender countries and investors balance risk and reward.
No one forced Argentina to borrow money on international capital markets. For them to walk away from the obligations that they willingly undertook is deeply inappropriate.
Whether Argentina defaults or strikes a last-minute deal, you'll hear about it here. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Salvatore Calalori. On Fox & Friends, co-host Brian Kilmeade suggested that President Obama is trying to bait Congress into impeaching him by overreaching on the implementation of immigration policies. Co-host Steve Doocy then used this opportunity to make the following claim.
Brian, to your point about impeachment, only Democrats are talking about it. Republicans, conservatives, not talking about it. Only Democrats. It's to gin up the base before November.
Yet just a few weeks earlier, following the Obama administration's deal to secure the release of American service member Bo Bergdahl from the Taliban, Fox News legal analyst Andrew Napolitano sat adjacent to Doocy on Fox & Friends and endorsed calls for impeachment.
Andy McCarthy, a friend of this program who's got a new book out, he said yesterday...
He says the president should be impeached for this.
That's what he does say. He says it's crimes and misdemeanors.
In my view, it's a very, very valid argument that people are going to start talking about.
For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, Visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
If the federal government continues to do the kinds of things that this administration is trying to do through the back door, through the National Labor Relations Board, that's killing our free market system.
We're running out of rich people in this country.
The NLRB has become a political sycophant for labor unions.
And one of the things the Congress should do immediately is defund the National Labor Relations Board.
It seems to me that what we're seeing is a ceding of power from Congress to the NLRB and other agencies.
Really is a freedom versus tyranny issue.
I'm a member of the GOP, trying to form a plutocracy. But if I can just bamboozle you, and you'll share my narrow point of view, what a wonderful world this would be.
Yeah, no, you gotta love Michelle Bachmann. I am so gonna miss Michelle Bachmann when she leaves. Although, you know, she says 2016 she may be running for president again. Won't be in the House, but you know, maybe she'll come up with her own Michelle TV to kind of match Sarah Palin's TV network. Fun to see. But we're running out of rich people, according to Michelle. Very, very interesting. And it's this hatred of the National Labor Relations Board by the right, because, you know, heaven forbid those workers have any rights or anyone to stand up for them. But a couple of very good decisions this week, I think, that have come out of the National Labor Relations Board, which is why I've asked our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson, to come talk to us. Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here.
So we're running out of rich people. Did you know that?
Well, I'm ready to take up the cudgels and become a rich person just to find out what it was like.
There you go.
And I loved your song, your music here. Michelle Bachmann and Don't Know Much About Anything really seem to go together.
And then you throw in the Rand Paul and the rest of them. It's quite a chorus.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
So walk me through this decision that came out yesterday about McDonald's. Evidently, yes. There's been a decision made that the corporate headquarters, the corporate McDonald's, has some responsibility of all of the McDonald's. Explain this to me.
Well, in order to explain, I probably need to spend a couple of seconds sort of discussing the disingenuous business model that McDonald's and Burger King and all
of the franchises,
Popeyes, and all of these franchise operators created several decades ago. We have this company that, you know, whether we are in Lemoyne, Pennsylvania, or San Diego, California, or Edmonton, Alberta, or Tel Aviv, Israel, or Beijing, China, looks and acts exactly the same golden arches, the same menu items in virtually all cases, the same uniforms, the same everything, but at the same time say to all of us that these are not one national or international chain of stores, but that they are separate individual franchise-based, local, small being the operative word, businesses. And as such, they don't come under the orbit or the scrutiny or the requirements of the very large international, wildly intertwined, interwoven, multi-tiered corporate conglomerate business that they are, recognizing, of course, that if you happen to be the holder of a McDonald's franchise in, I don't know, Clearfield, Pennsylvania, you are told what your restaurant is supposed to look like, how much equipment, how many people should be working there, where you buy the fries and where you buy the buns and where you buy the beef, under the slogan of "Where's the beef?" And so many things that are controlled by the national or international, really, corporate office, controlled so much that the corporate office frequently and often without announcement comes and does reviews and measurements and observations of each of the individual franchises that go so far as to, have not only hidden shoppers, as it were, but have people who are observing exactly how much time the staff at the restaurant takes to handle the drive-in window. So with all of that as a backdrop, what the NLRB's general counsel did yesterday was effectively announce that as a matter of law, all that we have every right to assume actually does exist, and that is that the corporate headquarters office entity and the local franchise holder are in effect joint employers, at least for labor relations purposes. And that, of course, has led to a hue and cry from this multinational, multi-industry conglomerate entity called McDonald's and all of their affiliated associations in the franchise industry, and all of their compatriots that in every other respect are their competitors, whether it's Burger King or Wendy's or Taco Bell or Popeyes or Chick-fil-A or who knows what. A hue and cry from all of them that somehow or another this is overreaching by the National Labor Relations Board, because the National Labor Relations Board has recognized that this is really no different than when Ford Motor Company operates multiple plants in multiple locations in North America. It's really the same thing. So, and there is a fear on the part of these franchise grantors that this fiction that they invented several decades ago is finally being pierced, and that they could actually be responsible for the labor management relations practices that they have imposed upon their franchise holders, and through their franchise holders on the poor folks who work at McDonald's and Burger King and Chick-fil-A and Popeyes and Wendy's and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really sort of the backdrop, and what it means is that when somebody who is working at McDonald's is the victim of an unfair labor practice, as that term is recognized by the National Labor Relations Act and through the Act, the National Labor Relations Board, that the corporate office, the franchise grantor, is an appropriate respondent in that case, not simply the franchise holder of the local McDonald's over on whatever, Hershey Park Drive. And that is being met today by the news media and by the fast food industry in particular as if it is some radical change in the law, but it is just as consistent can be with what we have all known and had every right to expect. The proper application and interpretation of the National Labor Relations Act should be going back to its passage in 1935.
Right. Yeah, but in looking at this, I mean, you're right. I mean, the McDonald's came out and said, "Oh, basically, it's heresy. This is radical change and all of this stuff." And to me, I thought this is kind of common sense. Because I've worked in fast food places once in my life and saw how this whole operation kind of works out. You buy the food from an approved supplier. The uniforms come from the main office. All of this stuff comes from the top, but they have no responsibility for what they do. And I thought this was a really good decision, and B, really late.
Well, it is a proper decision. I don't know that I would call it good or bad. I would call it consistent with certainly the intent of the National Labor Relations Act. And it is not late. It is, well beyond late. I don't even know what the word for overly tardy is, but they didn't show up for first grade, and now we're at graduation.
Right. But then the other question comes with this. Now, there are a lot of And I can see why the business community, having had really ultimate control all this time, can look at this as a change of their situation, because there are a lot of industries that have gotten away with this. I mean, when I first saw this, I'm thinking FedEx, because everything comes from Memphis, and all of these, subcontracted, all of these little franchises that got to drive the truck with the name on the side and wear the purple uniforms and do all of this stuff. Isn't that kind of the same thing?
Well, it certainly seems that way to me. The decision yesterday took pains to explain that it's a decision based on the facts of this particular case. There were 43 cases that were decided yesterday in this fashion for all practical purposes, and there are a couple of hundred that are out there still pending that need to be reviewed. But the logic of this seems to me to be equally applicable, whether it's to another fast food chain or to FedEx or maybe to DHL in its operating model in the United States, or maybe to Napa Auto Parts or Big A Auto Parts or Advanced Auto Parts, or any number of these retail entities that created this fiction that the national corporate office has this one-way street right to collect money and not be responsible for its practices. Yeah. The squealing that we're hearing, like stuck pigs, if you will, over the last 24 hours, is the squealing of a convict that got caught. That for so many years they've broken the law. And understand where we start analytically and what we should really be doing as a country and as a society in the context of public policy is recognizing that we have had decades of this caliber of operators violating the law continuously, daily, repeatedly, nationally, and getting away with that violation with impunity. When somebody steals the loaf of bread, that classic story, because she's trying to feed her children after having been ousted from her job or reduced from full-time to part-time at the McDonald's so that they can avoid that person even qualifying for basic health care benefits, that's somebody that's prosecuted and ultimately incarcerated. But when these multinational corporate giants violate federal labor law that is unchanged since 1935, we seem to say to them that that's good business, attaboy. And now they're very upset that the National Labor Relations Board, very late to the party, has said what should have been and has been so obvious to all of us for so long. And remember, by the way, this is the National Labor Relations Board. It is not the National How Can Business Screw Workers Board.
Although it has been in past years.
Well, it has been perverted into that, and that perversion led to this other perversion that we're speaking about now. This whole notion that the McDonald's of the world could get away with this is an underlying and foundational perversion of the basic tenets and aspirations, as well as the language of the National Labor Relations Act, of the regulations promulgated under the National Labor Relations Act, of the procedures engrafted into the National Labor Relations Act administratively by the board's operations. This is a reversal of that perversion for the first time in a very long time. And basically, I can't recall a time in my young life when this business model didn't exist. It has certainly been refined and elevated to an art form in more recent years. But I recall in my childhood in Pittsburgh, there was a corollary for this. There were the big boy restaurants that operated as Shoney's in the southern part of the United States and operated as Eaton Park, for example, in the Pittsburgh area, and it operated in the Harrisburg area as Big Boy restaurants.
Right, and in Ohio it was Bob's and Frisch's, and yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So, I mean, it's not a new business model, but it has been developed and refined. I mean, to his credit, Ray Kroc, during his lifetime, after he invented this idea of the 15-cent hamburger at the old McDonald's, went on to develop this other piece of the business model that was really aimed at maximizing profits and income by exploiting workers, and then telling the story that these were all just entry-level jobs for high school kids looking to earn a couple of bucks part-time, when we all know that what this has become is something dramatically different from that.
So let me ask you, last question I've got on this. You know, and looking at what's going on with the organizing of the fast food workers and the big convention they just had in Chicago, how do these two things do you think they're going to play together?
Well, I think that this makes the point that the organizing groups have been making all along, that we're not engaged in organizing the Popeye's chicken store on Cameron Street in Harrisburg. We're engaged in organizing the industry, and this is a recognition that this is an industry. And it may be that McDonald's is a different employer from Burger King, and Burger King is a different employer from Kentucky Fried Chicken. But in the end, all of the McDonald's are in this together, and as a joint employer, that's significant. Additionally, as we have begun to see around the country, if we carry this logic through to another appropriate step or two, around the country, various states and various communities have been taking a look at their local and regional labor standards laws and into things like minimum wage and maximum hour and premium pay for overtime and so on. And several of these local communities and in several states have increased their minimum wage. And in those minimum wage increases, they have created a threshold that this only applies to employers with more than X number of employees. In other words, large or medium-sized employers, not small employers. And to this point, all of the McDonald's types, all of the franchise restaurants, fast food restaurants, have suggested in every jurisdiction where the minimum wage has been raised that it doesn't apply to them because they're too small. And right. Now, if we carry this logic through, it will apply because this joint employer, this large employer, is of a significant enough stature when we look at it through the lens of the NLRB and its general counsel to actually treat this as if they do fall within the ambit of these new minimum wage, maximum hour, overtime pay laws, and that is very significant for people who work in the industry now.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. I did have one other question about the another decision by the NLRB this week.
It's a big week this week.
It was this idea of micro unions popped up. And you know, the NLRB first recognized them, I guess, back in 2011 at this specialty healthcare place. But they this week endorsed another one of these micro unions at Macy's and gave these handful of Macy's employees the ability to organize. And it brought me back to the idea that, you know, there was a time in history where virtually every craft had its own association, guild, union, whatever you wanted to call it. And you know, isn't that kind of what this micro union idea is?
Well, first of all, let's not get caught up in using the enemy's language, if you will, the offended people's language. There's no such thing as a micro-union. Contrary to what the business community would like you to think, what there is a group of people who have a community of interest who choose to organize themselves. They do not get to pick the business model that their employers utilize. Their employers choose that business model.
Right.
So when an employer like Macy's, in the case you're talking about, involved Macy's and a group of cosmetic workers, cosmetics salespeople and assistants in a particular Macy's store, when Macy's decides to have a special, separate cosmetic department or cosmetic counter, or if Wanamaker's decides to do that, or the May Company decides to do that, or whatever, Target, Walmart, if they choose, the workers there are not somehow to be treated differently than workers in any other workplace. That is a separate and discrete department in that department store. Remember, this is a department store. And it's unreasonable or unfair to suggest that because their employer happens to be big and their employer has organized effectively several different stores, a women's wear store, a men's wear store, a cosmetics store, maybe a specialty food store if it's Harrods in England, a children's store, a bedding store, a furniture store, a white goods, sheets, pillowcases, towels kind of store, all under one roof. That doesn't mean all of a sudden that the people who happen to be employed by that employer lose their legal rights simply because of the development over time of this business. So what the board said in this Macy's case is that a group of people who work in the cosmetics department of this particular Macy's store have an articulable community of interest that is separate and apart from those of all the other people that are working under that roof in the multiple other departments, shipping, receiving, who knows what. And Macy's suggested somehow that this is working an unfair hardship on them, that they indeed can't be forced to negotiate with different groups simply because they chose to organize the store into those different groups. And the board once again said, no, we accept the petition of this group of workers, and it is to you, the employer, to prove to the board that either this group does not have a community of interest among itself, or alternatively, that it has a community of interest that is broader than just them, and that includes the women's wear department, or the men's suits department, or the women's shoes department, or the shipping department, or the beauty parlor that may exist in the Saks Fifth Avenue store. And once again, there is a wailing, a hue, and a cry from the employers that have tried to use this model to load up bargaining units and make it impossible for people to unionize by saying that you have to organize everybody in this building. And indeed, you may have to organize everybody that works for us throughout the United States and show a significant showing of interest, not only of the people in the cosmetics department in the Macy's store in Short Hills, New Jersey, but also the shipping and receiving people in San Francisco, California at exactly the same time before you can consider whether or not these folks have a right to have a union. And once again, that approach has been an employer-based approach to pervert and thwart the intent and the language of the National Labor Relations Act. And this decision, again, simply announces that the intent of the framers of that statute are to be and are to have been taken seriously, that the law actually means what it says. So I hope that's not overly complex.
No, it makes perfect sense. So then it's not gerrymandering the workplace, as the guy from the chamber said?
Well, coming from the expert gerrymanderers who have so invested in twisting and turning multiple state legislative districts and multiple congressional districts across the country so that they are shaped like everything from half-moon crescents to the body of a spider. It was intriguing to hear that allegation because they have attempted to utilize, in effect, reverse gerrymandering for the sole and exclusive purpose of defeating the right of their employees, or their, in this case, the chamber members' employees, from having the capacity to exercise what is guaranteed to them under National Labor Relations law. So, no, it is anything but gerrymandering, and I think that your point was well taken. Not only historically, but even today, we have other models of workers, so that in the building and construction trades, for example, in the creative arts, for example, in the longshore industry, for example, in over-the-road trucking, for example, we have people who are organized by trades and crafts and skills. So we have the Screen Actors Guild, that is a single union that represents people who are screen actors, and we have, in addition to that, the related unions in AFTRA, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, the theater, the live theater performers, the musicians union, and so on. In each of those instances, people become a member of their craft union, as we do with carpenters and plumbers and pipe fitters, electricians, roofers, construction craft laborers, painters, plasterers, paper hangers, glazers, over-the-road truckers that we know as Teamsters. That is normal and well accepted and deeply ingrained, actually, in organizational models that predate the National Labor Relations Act by decades, going back to the 19th century, not even the 20th century. So this is nothing new. This is not some great revelation. We have, even in industries that are sort of dying off, the vaunted local union, the old International Ladies Garment Workers Union, Local 10, was known as the Cutters Local. And these were people who did pattern cutting. They were very highly skilled, and they were members of Local 10 in New York, worked in the industry for many different employers at the same time, just the way carpenters or plumbers work for many different employers in the course of a year today. Nothing new, nothing novel, nothing unique. The suggestion by the chamber or its members that somehow or another this is novel or unique is the shedding of crocodile tears for somebody, or by somebody, I mean, who got caught.
And that's exactly where my thought was. I'm looking at this and going, maybe there's some hope for the future, because I've been a little bit despaired lately as you look at some of the numbers and some of the things coming out, and these decisions, hopefully, some common sense back.
Well, certainly it's common sense, but more importantly, it's not just common sense, but it's an appropriate application of the law. And at a time when we hear so much about what we were and are and should do to respect the framers, the notion that the very people who purport to tell us what the framers of laws and the Constitution intended somehow coming out against these decisions that are very consistent with the intent of the framers rings a little hollow.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to leave it. Erwin, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for the information, and thanks for laying it out for us.
Sure. Good to be here, Rick. Take care.
Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Folks, we are just talking about the impact of exploration process here. Imagine what's going to happen when the actual drilling starts.
Obama administration approves controversial sonic cannons for offshore oil exploration on the East Coast.
It was just unbelievable, like in Massachusetts, this happening.
Bizarre extreme weather across the U.S. Colorado judge strikes down local fracking ban. General Mills takes action on global warming. Plus,
this technology enables for us to talk to the world.
Rocker Neil Young wants your help to stop illegal logging in the rainforest.
All of that illegal logging in the free world and more straight ahead
From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Their flocculent poo enriches the phytoplankton and stimulates the fisheries.
I know I'm stimulated. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we always like to do on this broadcast, connecting the climate change dots. We've got crazy weather, not just bad weather, but crazy weather, from lightning on the west coast to tornadoes on the east coast to beautiful, cool fall weather in the middle of July in the middle of the country.
Yeah, it's really weird extreme weather. For example, over the weekend, for the first time in recorded history, a tornado hit the northern Boston coastal town of Revere.
Just outside Boston, Massachusetts, a powerful EF2 tornado, winds up to 120 miles per hour.
It was just unbelievable, like in Massachusetts, this happening.
It is the first tornado ever confirmed in that county.
And in Venice Beach in Southern California, as you mentioned, one man was killed and at least 13 others were injured by extremely rare lightning. Witnesses reported at least 4 direct lightning strikes on the beach. That almost never happens.
On the weekend, in the middle of summer beach season out here in LA, just amazing.
I know, especially because it almost never rains in July, and here we had lightning.
In the meantime, I'm hearing from all of these people in the Midwest who are usually sweltering right now with horrible humidity in the middle of July and August, and they're telling me it's cool, beautiful, 40% humidity. Something strange is going on, and maybe it's that climate change you've heard so much about.
In other news,
aside from the environmental impact, this is going to affect anyone on the East Coast whose job relies on fishing or tourism.
the Obama administration will allow the oil industry to use sonic cannons to look for oil and gas beneath the sea floor off the Atlantic coast. It is the next step before opening up the region to offshore drilling. Conservation biologist Dr. Reese Halter tells Ed Schultz on MSNBC that this will severely harm thousands of marine animals like endangered whales.
It shatters their eardrums. They experience the most excruciating death possible. These cannons are going to kill thousands of dolphins and whales. They're going to maim hundreds of thousands of dolphins and whales.
And I'd also like to note that whales, dolphins, and other marine animals did not respond to requests for comment.
No one ever asked the whales or dolphins for their opinions.
Nope, they never do. In Colorado, a federal judge has struck down a voter-approved ban on fracking within the city limits of Longmont, Colorado. The judge said, quote, "The citizens' sincerely held beliefs about risks to their health and safety conflicted with state law and the state's interest in developing oil and gas deposits." Longmont is just one of hundreds of towns fighting to put limits on the explosion of oil and gas drilling within their borders.
So the citizens voted against fracking, local control, which, by the way, is what Republicans always claim is the most important type of control, and now the big government state is overriding them. I imagine Republicans are furious about that?
No, they're not. They're siding with the state and the oil and gas industry lawsuits.
Imagine that.
But some good news. After a grassroots consumer campaign organized by Oxfam, food and beverage giant General Mills has announced a corporation-wide initiative to cut its greenhouse gas emissions and will require the same from its global suppliers as well. And it's probably self-serving because grain prices are already spiking due to extreme weather around the world.
Yeah, I always knew that General Mills was a good guy.
Moving on. Rocker Neil Young has thrown his weight behind a new Kickstarter campaign from the group Rainforest Connection to fight illegal logging in the Amazon rainforest that will allow the trees to call for help, literally.
We use old, recycled smartphones that we hide in trees to listen for the sound of destruction. The moment one of our devices detects the sound profiles of chainsaws or other problems, an alert is sent to local rangers who can intervene in real time and halt the logging.
Rainforest Connection says a test project in Indonesia worked on the first day to stop illegal loggers in the act.
So the whales and dolphins aren't talking to us, but the trees are.
Yep.
Can we talk back to them?
Unless you speak tree, not yet.
For much more on those stories and a whole bunch we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves. Download us anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, and find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
I talk to the trees, but they don't listen to me. I talk to...
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
If you want to, here's to the future. He's a crying, I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. And I want it now.
Interesting conversation there with our good friend, Attorney Erwin Aronson, and explaining the McDonald's decision, which I'm hoping that we'll see that decision multiply, because that business model has been, as he said, it's been around for a while. It's been quite some time, but it's been perfected and abused in my view. And my first thought, as someone who worked in the trucking industry for years, is Federal Express. They have really mastered the outsourcing, the misclassification, the independent contractors, because the vast majority of the trucks that you see with the FedEx name on it don't actually work for FedEx, don't actually work for Federal Express. They're contractors. They're owned by another company who hires people, maybe hires subcontractors or day laborers or whatever. That's how they do their. That's how they've set up their operation. And do you not think that gives them a competitive advantage over UPS and even the Postal Service? And what it's really, all the intent is to drive down conditions, to lower labor costs so that there's more of the profit going upward. That's the end of it. It's that simple. So when I saw the CEO of McDonald's, a guy named Don Thompson, who's raking in millions of dollars a year, say that his company would support raising the federal minimum wage up to $10.10 an hour, I'm going, well, good on one hand, but what's the ulterior motive? The first part of it is this idea that, the market will determine wages is kind of ridiculous. What you have is a market that is colluded together to say, well, we're not going to pay increasingly better wages. We're going to hold things stagnant at minimum wage or pennies above, because there's a glut of labor out there. And I've talked to a number of fast food workers who have been with the restaurant that they're at for years, 5, 10, 20 years. And this idea that, we can replace you at any time keeps those wages down. And the other part of it for me comes to the thought that McDonald's is full steam ahead mechanizing. They're one of the industry innovators. In fact, Wendy's a couple years ago, and nobody seems to remember this, but Wendy's actually considered doing all of their drive-through orders from India. They wanted to, I swear, you look it up. They wanted to have, you'd go up to the window, you'd speak your order into the little speaker thing. It would transmit to India. They would put it on a screen that would end up inside the restaurant there, and it would just. They thought it was going to work. They thought that they could get rid of that person at the window, who all they're doing is standing there taking your order and taking your money. They thought that they could do away with that person by outsourcing it to India for $1 an hour. So this idea that, if you raise the minimum wage, it's going to kill jobs, is kind of ludicrous, because they're trying to do it regardless. If they can do away with the all labor, they're going to do it. Doesn't it seem to stick? So I find it just very, very interesting. And this whole discussion about this misclassification is something we're going to have to deal with in the coming weeks, months, and years to make sure that, people are treated decently. At least decently. Maybe not great, but at least decently. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Public liberty, Yesterday's worse, tomorrow's ashes.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The City of Los Angeles says it will appeal a ruling by the city's Employee Relations Board rescinding $4.3 billion in unilateral pension cuts imposed on new hires. The Employee Relations Board ruled it was an unlawful cut made without collective bargaining. Cheryl Parisi is AFSCME District Council 36 Executive Director and also Chair of the Coalition of LA City Unions.
We hope that the city makes a decision to abide by the law and abide by the ruling of the city's Employee Relations Board. That is our hope, rather than reverting to the courts.
Parisi says that the unions reopened their contract a couple of years ago and agreed to pay more out of pocket for their pensions, but the city then unilaterally imposed new pension changes on new hires, arguing they have the legal authority to do that without bargaining.
We thought it was a false legal theory and challenged that the Employee Relations Board. And ultimately, after months of hearings and review, the hearing officer issued her report, and the Employee Relations Board upheld that report and found that, in fact, changes to the pension plan were a mandatory subject of bargaining because the pension plan was adopted in violation of the law, ordered that the terms of the prior pension plan be reinstituted.
The unions are currently in contract negotiations with the city. The unions represent some 20,000 Los Angeles city workers. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is on a mission to cut the pensions of public workers there, but complete details on what he wants to do haven't yet been made public. Raising the retirement age for public workers again, as he did in 2011, is one thing he wants to do. Despite signing a law to require the payments, Christie shortchanged the public pensions system by $2.4 billion in promised payments this year. Christie claims New Jersey might end up bankrupt, like Detroit, as he put it, if the state is forced to honor its legal obligation to pay pensions already earned by public workers. Hetty Rosenstein is New Jersey Director for the Communications Workers of America.
These are not Cadillac benefits. These are modest pension plans that are being paid for between 55 and 65% by the employees themselves, by their contributions. These payments are very large for the state to make. We can't deny that. But by not making the payments, they're making them larger.
The Wisconsin governor's race is in a dead heat as Democrat Mary Burke takes on Wisconsin's union-busting governor Scott Walker. So if Burke is able to unseat Walker, what does that mean for public worker collective bargaining rights in Wisconsin? Burke told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel she supports, quote, the right of public employees to collectively bargain and will work to restore that right, end quote. She says the employee out-of-pocket contributions to health care and pension plans that are in the anti-union law, Act 10, could have been achieved through collective bargaining. If elected governor of Wisconsin, Burke says she would work to repeal parts of Act 10, like annual union recertification elections and the ban on automatic dues collections. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
What the hell we fighting for? Just surrender any woman at all. Just like time to say your prayer. While you're waiting for the hammer to fall.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So a little earlier today, Congressman Keith Ellison, along with Representative Lewis, unveiled the Employee Empowerment Act, this idea that workers might have the right to sue union busters, to go after their employee for violating their right to organize. Making the right of organizing, of standing with your coworkers and saying, we want to join and form a union, and actually a civil right, which to me is a huge step in the right direction. It's not going to pass, I don't think, given the complexity of what's going on in Washington, but it is going to open up the discussion of what kind of rights do we have on the job, which is why I've asked Liz Watson. She is the Director of Workplace Justice for Women and the Senior Counsel at the National Women's Law Center, nwlc.org, the website. Liz, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So lay this out for me. Why is this legislation important, do you think, for women?
This legislation is critically important for women because collective bargaining gives women a seat at the table where all too often decisions are right now being made about them without them. And when women and men try to organize and form unions right now, very often what is happening is that employers are retaliating against them, sometimes through firing them. And this makes it incredibly difficult for workers to organize and form unions. And so this bill is critically important to beef up the protections that workers have to organize and form unions.
Well, if someone's let me play a little devil advocate here. Let's say someone's fired or terminated or harassed. Aren't there laws in place to help them now?
Look, I think too many employers right now view the process through the National Labor Relations Act, unfair labor practice charges that can be filed against them, as a slap on the wrist. And it needs to be clear to employers that if they violate workers' rights to organize, they are going to suffer and the possibility of being sued in court and the possibility of damages. We need the strongest possible disincentives to employers violating workers' rights to organize, and this is critically important for women because particularly for women, the union difference is so pronounced. Women in unions earn 33% more than their non-union counterparts, and that's just talking about wages. Of course, unions provide women with benefits like paid vacation and sick leave and fair work schedules, retirement security, all things that women and their families badly need.
And I think all workers need. And will this Employee Empowerment Act, will this bring those kind of penalties, those kind of disincentives for employers to abuse workers' rights to organize?
So yes, by creating the same penalties that are available to be able to go to court and sue the same ways that someone can sue under the civil rights law, it will create stronger disincentives, which are really badly needed to protect workers' rights to organize and form unions. And we know that today only 11% of employed women are union members, and so many more women need the benefits of unionization, and particularly women in low-wage jobs who are fighting so hard for their rights to be represented by a union. When you look at workers in jobs paying under $10.10 an hour, fully 2/3 of those workers are women, and many of them mothers, and they're just trying to get by and support their families, and they need the benefit of a union wage.
I'm right there with you, but you look at this and it makes me ask the question why we haven't seen a mass clamoring of workers to wanting to join unions and call them what you want, unions, guilds, associations, whatever, but saying that we want to collectively bargain for the wealth that we create. And I look at the fast food industry as a perfect example. This is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry that pays poverty wages.
That's right. And of course, fast food workers are fighting for their right to organize. And workers across the country are standing up and banding together and acting collectively to fight for their rights. And just today, we were on Capitol Hill with workers from Good Jobs Nation who are working in federal contract jobs in the District of Columbia, doing things like cleaning federal buildings, working in Union Station, in retail stores, and they're fighting for their rights to be recognized as a union to be able to get better wages and working conditions. So I think workers are standing up and they are sticking their necks out and they deserve protection.
I absolutely agree. But, having done organizing throughout the years and having met people who've gone through the process, I believe it's much too difficult at this point for workers because we have the right to organizing. You look at the National Labor Relations Act, it tells us we have this right. Yet there are so many roadblocks in the way. And, as I asked the question yesterday, does this give us the ability to go after and sue the employers and the other actors that the Jackson Lewises of the world and these union busting firms who are constantly harassing and surveilling and all of the stuff that comes along with this union avoidance tactics?
So this bill does give the right to sue an employer in court who is engaged in union busting and who is retaliating, yes. And I think that is very, very important. I mean, of course, they're already, rights to organize, as you said, are already protected under the National Labor Relations Act. But this puts more teeth into those laws and really gives employers the disincentives that they so badly need from engaging in these union busting tactics.
Well, let me ask you this. Under the current law, And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. And for those who didn't tune in yesterday, explain to us what happens. Let's say you're fired for a union activity right now. What are the consequences for an employer at this moment? And how would this legislation either change that, improve it? Give me your thoughts.
So right now, somebody who is fired for engaging in protected activity under the National Labor Relations Act can file an unfair labor practice charge with the NLRB. But what this does is to allow that person to actually go to court and to get real damages associated with that violation. And that, of course, gives much stronger remedies to workers and really, makes clear to employers that this is not just a slap on the wrist you're going to suffer if you violate someone's rights to organize.
Right, and currently,
and we hope will really help them think twice.
Right, no, because currently, if you're fired for one of these activities unjustly, the fine is the slap on the wrist is the employer has to pay the back wages minus any wages the employee may have earned in another job. So if you found a job that made more money, there was no penalty to the employer for firing you whatsoever. As I understand it, this piece of legislation would actually put some substantial fines, maybe up to $300,000, plus paying legal fees, which I think is a huge, huge push in the right direction.
I think that's absolutely right.
So what are the chances of this, given the complexities of what's going on in Washington, what do you think the chances of this seeing the light of day are?
Well, look, this is a very important issue, and I think workers across the country are making their voices heard right now. As you know, income inequality is, and I apologize for I'm just coming off the Hill. I apologize for the loud noise that you're hearing in the background.
No, that's fine.
It's a busy day in Washington. But I think, we know that this issue, the right to organize, is at the top of the list for many workers, and that they are going to continue to press it, and that we have leaders in Congress, Congressman Ellison, Congressman Nadler, and Congressman Lewis, who introduced this bill today, who are going to continue to be the champions for working people and to try to see this through to the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, while it's not going to, I think it'll see the light of day in the House right now. I do think it's an opportunity to start talking about and bringing to the forefront situations that workers have been getting the shaft with for a number of years, generations, if you will, and an opportunity for voters to look at politicians and go, okay, which side of this issue do you find yourself? And maybe we as a working class in this country, we begin to think about our jobs again.
Well, I agree with you completely. And thank you so much for having me on to discuss this really critically important issue for women and for families. When workers can band together to assert their rights and don't have to stick their necks out alone, it benefits all of us.
Well, Liz, I appreciate you taking time for us. It was great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks so much. No, but I look at this, and the reality is, and I appreciate Liz coming on the program and talking to us about this, because it's one of those things that I think is very important. This idea that workers should have rights, and there should be someone who makes sure that they aren't infringed upon. That just for the slap of a wrist that they can be taken away seems to me to be very, very important. And as this conversation continues down the road with this legislation, and look, I remember going back to the Employee Free Choice Act. And for those who have been listening to this program for years, back during the Bush years, they were going to push the Employee Free Choice Act, which was a compromise bill during the Bush years, a bare minimum, bare bones kind of thing that would have put not teeth, but maybe one tooth in the law. It actually would have, had it passed. It did pass the House, filibustered in the Senate. Bush may have signed it. There was an indication that he may have signed it, but the Republicans in the House filibustered it. What I find interesting, though, you look at the Employee Free Choice Act, and it gave people the right to sign cards and join unions, a first contract arbitration, which said if you don't come to that first contract within X amount of time, there would be an arbitrator that would decide the contract for you, so that there was none of this 5, 10, 15 years of negotiating a contract and arguing over where the period should be and which I and T should be dotted. And penalties, 3 times the amount of lost wages without the deduction of whatever was earned. So there were some teeth, and the 3 times it isn't a huge penalty, but it's something. Now, that was the compromise. That was what they thought Bush would sign. That's what they tried to get Arlen Specter to come on board with, and it was Arlen who killed it, which I just find very interesting. And I think it's because he had no idea of what it was about, or played ignorant. But in having these discussions, and I'm glad that this bill that Ellison is putting forth, I'm glad this goes a lot farther than the Employee Free Choice Act did, because then we start talking about real solutions. Just a thought. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Hear what I say. It's money that matters in the USA. It's money that matters.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's time for The World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. Argentinian officials are meeting with a court-appointed mediator in New York today to try and strike a deal that would prevent the country from defaulting on its national debt for the second time in 12 years. At the tail end of Argentina's financial crisis in the early 2000s, its sovereign bonds sold for cheap on international markets. By 2005, cash-strapped Argentina proposed a debt restructuring to those bond investors. Many accepted the deal, but a portion of investors are still holding out.
There are still about 8% of the bondholders that have never been satisfied with 25 or 30 cents on the dollar. They want to be paid much closer to the face value of the debt that they hold. And they've been pursuing Argentina in the court since 2005 in New York.
Brett House teaches economics at McGill University and is an expert in sovereign debt restructuring at the Center for International Governance Innovation. In June, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear out an Argentinian appeal to delay paying its creditors, leading to the countdown to potential default on Thursday.
Argentina has to pay those holdout creditors at the same time as it makes payments on the restructured debt. If it doesn't do both, then it's in essentially a default situation and in contempt of court.
Argentina's remaining creditors are often referred to as vulture funds, the suggestion being that they prey on poor countries or are unreasonable in resisting settlement. But House says the term distorts the reality of a healthy sovereign debt market, in which both lender countries and investors balance risk and reward.
No one forced Argentina to borrow money on international capital markets. For them to walk away from the obligations that they willingly undertook is deeply inappropriate.
Whether Argentina defaults or strikes a last-minute deal, you'll hear about it here. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Salvatore Calalori. On Fox & Friends, co-host Brian Kilmeade suggested that President Obama is trying to bait Congress into impeaching him by overreaching on the implementation of immigration policies. Co-host Steve Doocy then used this opportunity to make the following claim.
Brian, to your point about impeachment, only Democrats are talking about it. Republicans, conservatives, not talking about it. Only Democrats. It's to gin up the base before November.
Yet just a few weeks earlier, following the Obama administration's deal to secure the release of American service member Bo Bergdahl from the Taliban, Fox News legal analyst Andrew Napolitano sat adjacent to Doocy on Fox & Friends and endorsed calls for impeachment.
Andy McCarthy, a friend of this program who's got a new book out, he said yesterday...
He says the president should be impeached for this.
That's what he does say. He says it's crimes and misdemeanors.
In my view, it's a very, very valid argument that people are going to start talking about.
For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need.
Now's the time we should be going the distance. Now's the time we should be looking to, to fight even harder. Now that there's a piece of legislation to get behind and to fight for this Employee Empowerment Act put forth by Representative Keith Ellison and Representative John Lewis. And look, I understand, in the Republican-led House, not probably going to go anywhere, but this is a rallying point. This is an opportunity for people to go, you know what? There are people out there who are willing to fight for us. And to me, that's absolutely huge. Anyway, today the big press event laying out this piece of legislation, attended by thousands of people there. I've got Alex Paz. He was one of the folks who was one of the speakers. You may remember us talking about Alex. He's a misclassified independent contractor, so to speak, and also someone who was, I understand, terminated for his union support. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, how's it going, Rick?
I'm good. Tell me about the event today.
The event went pretty good. I got to meet Congresswoman Janice Hahn and also Benny G. Thompson. And then we had a little press conference. We got to meet organizers over there, too. And basically, we were just supporting the bill that Ellison's trying to get out there to protect the workers from, to give us civil rights. Basically, if we form a union, we cannot get attacked, we cannot get fired, we can turn around and fight back. And also, with that bill being passed, also the companies can dance around the situation by feeling or nothing. They have to face the music and listen to us and give us the right to unionize.
Well, let's look at it from your perspective. As I understand, you guys out there in California have been trying to organize. The company has been fighting vehemently to deny you the right to organize. This piece of legislation, I think, would help, right?
Oh yeah, it would definitely help, because right now, like you said, we went on strike, and also here's an example. In July we went on strike, then we did a cooling off period because Mayor Eric Garcetti said, let's do a cooling off period while my team investigates the allegations and what's going on. We want to find out what's going on. And in the middle of the truth was, okay, we'll go back to work, but in the condition that the companies do not retaliate against us, we go back to work. No harm, no foul while the investigation is pending. What the companies do, right away they turn around and they started retaliating against the drivers. They don't want to give them work, and they don't care what the mayor has to say. Basically, they're saying that we run the show, they don't. And basically, you know what I mean? It's like the Wild Wild West. They think they could do whatever they want. And with this bill, they're not going to be able to do that no more. We'll be able to have another form of fighting and knowing that they cannot do that no more. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely, and that's why I think this piece of legislation is very important.
Yeah.
Because it would, you didn't want to go through this when you decided that I wanted to try and make a better life for myself and my coworkers. You didn't want to go through all of this hassle and all of this headache for what I believe should be and is legally right now. You're right.
Yeah, correct. It's basically, it's like we're fighting for our rights, but then this company right here are totally going against it, and they just don't get it. By misclassifying the drivers, they're denying payroll tax, no workers' comp, no health insurance, and then they turn around and still they're avoiding to pay that, and then still on top of that they decide, oh, I'm going to go ahead and make the driver pay for my registration, my insurance, my truck maintenance, my registration. And I'm still gonna, out of their pocket, I'm still gonna make them put fuel in my truck to make me money. So basically, it's something that's out of control, and that's the reason why we stand up and we're fighting for our rights. And hopefully, we want this bill to pass, and for the companies so they could stop their little games and face up and do things right, and give us the right to unionize, to get fair wages for fair wages, and get respect and dignity, and and get the middle class back to work.
And recreate the middle class, because for too long, I think
Yeah,
I think what's
exactly.
happened is we've given so much power to these employers and so much authority that I guess wrestling it back is going to be a lot harder than it's been giving it to them.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you notice, all the middle class work, like the truck drivers and the manufacturers and everything, these corporations just taking over it, and basically, and if you look at it, America's not doing so good, and what do you know? What do you see? The American workers, the middle class is not working. Once the middle class is working, the middle class is the backbone of America. We're the ones that keep America going.
Yeah.
And
You're absolutely right.
hmm So so that's what it's a tough fight. It just got to the point where these corporations and these companies, they're all about profit, forget about the worker. And it's time for not only Ford drivers, for the whole industry, the middle class industry, to stand up and start fighting these companies and major retailers, trucking companies, and get the American middle class back to work and bring up this economy.
Are you seeing that are you seeing your coworkers and your friends and people that you're meeting? Are you seeing that light going on, that we can organize, that we can do this? Are you seeing that spark?
Yeah, I've seen it like for example, at the last strike that we did, I was at the terminal and I ran into a few truck drivers and they were questioning like, why you guys are on strike? Why, and we were telling them, and they were saying that's good what you guys are doing. You guys are fighting back. And another driver told me, out of the 20 years plus that I've been driving in the Fords, I've never seen a movement like this in the Fords ever. You guys are really starting to do something. And I thought, well, it doesn't hurt.
Why don't you join
see what's
us?
going on. Yeah, exactly. Come and join us. Come and join the fight. You see the movement. All this. And we're just 120 drivers that did that strike along with the volunteers, which I want to thank them a lot for helping us out there. I really, really appreciate the help from the volunteers to show that what we could do when we stick together. And just a little handful of us, we made an impact. We turned around companies. We delayed the cargo flow going in and out of the port, and we caused some havoc over there. And that's just a handful. And I was telling the drivers, imagine if at least 30% or 40% of the truck driving industry right there at the ports decides to strike or decides to stand up for the right. I mean, that's a big impact right there.
No,
Really
I've
big.
said that
So-
I've said that for years, Alex, and I've been especially my truck driving friends. Look, I worked for a trucking company for more than 20 years, and the reality is I've seen the industry go straight down as union density has gone away, as the number of union drivers has gone down. All of the negative things have gone up, and you've got people living in these trucks like animals. You've got cameras on both sides of the glass. You've got you've got this independent contractor nonsense. And I've been waiting, Alex, for that time where drivers say enough is enough, and people do what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And like I tell a lot of drivers, and it doesn't take much. It just takes the courage and then let's just stick together. And the more we are, and trust me, the companies, the bigger we are, the companies are they can't defeat all of us. You know what I mean?
Right.
And all we need to do is just stick together and keep on fighting and get this win for ourselves.
And also push along legislation like today's unfurling of this Employee Empowerment Act to give people that strength of law as well as strength of solidarity in numbers.
Yeah, correct. And then with that, and with that bill, will like you said, it will just give us more rights to unionize. It will really, really help us out. And these companies are not going to be able to twinkle around the situation and do what they're doing, retaliation. That would end, and they will have to face up and pay the fair share of taxes and pay their employees fair wages for a hard day's work.
So
that's why the fight continues.
Let me ask you this: you were fired by the company for organizing. You're back to work, right?
Yeah, but not for they haven't. CCSI hasn't hired me back or nothing like that. But I found another job and I'm working somewhere else and stuff like that. But yeah, basically, I went to the DLSE claim in May. And I testified before the California Labor Board commissioner, and the president was the owner of CPSI, Mr. Rosa, was there in presence at the hearing. And I testified, saying, hey, you know what, this is not my truck, not my registration. It's a company truck. He has total control over me. I said, what's really going on in the company and stand up for my rights. 2 days later, he literally gives me a letter and fired me for what I said. I mean, what kind? It's just shrewd business. They're shady. They're shady people that just don't care.
Yeah, the reason I was asking is, have you filed an unfair labor practice?
Yeah, we filed an unfair labor practice, and we're going to unfair labor practice, and we're getting all that stuff done, and it's just to let the boss know that, hey, you gotta stop this, man. It's child's play. What you're doing is childish,
Well, it's not childish. It's control. It's if we can make an example out of you, no one else will dare to test our power. That's what it's about. It's about power and control. But the reason I ask about the unfair labor practice is because down the road, when you win, what will the penalty be? What will happen to them under current law? Do you have any sense of what the penalty to be from their side would be if they lose and when they lose?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that when that comes out, well, I know for sure there's gonna be some steep fines. They're gonna have to hire me back, and they're gonna have to hire me back with a smile on their face and without no retaliation or nothing. But like I said, right now everything's in the court, and the companies are playing hardball.
Yeah. What actually happens though is they have to give you back pay of the wages that you would have lost, and now that you have another job, as I understand it, since you have another job, whatever your back pay is minus what you're earning currently, they'll subtract, and whatever's left over, that's what the fine will be. And then they have to bring you back and maybe post a notice saying they won't do it again. That's how weak our current labor laws are. And why I think this Employee Empowerment Act is so important is if this were the law of the land today, what Ellison and Lewis have put forth, they would give you the ability to go sue these people in court for up to $300,000 of damages and all kinds of legal fees as well. So there's a huge difference in the way employers look at firing someone illegally now, as I think they would look at them in the future if this law were to pass.
Oh yeah, they'll think twice about doing stuff like they're doing right now, and and like I said, we need to get this bill passed, and man, just basically stop this empowerment that these companies are doing over the workers.
Yeah, I mean, did you want did you want this to happen? I guess it's a dumb question, but did you envision that, hey, I'd like to make a better life for myself and my coworkers and my family and their families? Did you want all of this headache and this turmoil, getting on planes, going to Washington and back and forth? Did you want this?
To be honest with you, when I got into the fight, I did it more for they're disrespecting me and I'm not gonna get pushed around no more than I stand up. And to be honest with you, I never would have thought that standing up for my rights and doing this is such work. But at the end, it's worth it because I know I'm fighting for something, and that's right. And not just right for me, but right for every worker out there that's just getting pushed around. Every poor truck driver, they have families, like just like I have families, and it's a fight that is not just for me; it's for everybody. And it's worth it. It's worth the fight. It's worth it. And I never. And like I told my wife the other day, I go, never in my life I ever thought I would be involved in something like this. Ever since I spoke up, it's like, wow, my eyes open, I saw everything, and I'm keeping it pushing and try to get this win.
Yeah, see, that's what the employer class, that's what these people are afraid of. That people are going to open their eyes like you did, have that epiphany, that moment of clarity where you said, you know what, I didn't start the fight, but damn well I'm going to finish it. Alex, I appreciate you taking time for us. I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again at some point in the near future.
Okay, no problem, Rick. Thank you for having me. And if any Ford truck driver out there is listening, hey, don't be scared to stand up and fight for your rights. Once you get together, trust me, you can accomplish a lot of things.
There you go. Not just port drivers, but all workers, Alex.
Yeah, all workers, correct. Exactly, all workers.
Thanks so much. Alex Paz. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Folks, we are just talking about the impact of exploration process here. Imagine what's going to happen when the actual drilling starts.
Obama administration approves controversial sonic cannons for offshore oil exploration on the East Coast.
It was just unbelievable, like in Massachusetts, this happening.
Bizarre extreme weather across the U.S. Colorado judge strikes down local fracking ban. General Mills takes action on global warming. Plus,
this technology enables the forest to talk to the world.
rocker Neil Young wants your help to stop illegal logging in the rainforest.
All of that illegal logging in the free world and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Their flocculent poo enriches the phytoplankton and stimulates the fisheries.
I know I'm stimulated. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we always like to do on this broadcast, connecting the climate change dots. We've got crazy weather. Not just bad weather, but crazy weather, from lightning on the West Coast to tornadoes on the East Coast to beautiful, cool fall weather in the middle of July in the middle of the country.
Yeah, it's really weird extreme weather. For example, over the weekend, for the first time in recorded history, a tornado hit the northern Boston coastal town of Revere.
Just outside Boston, Massachusetts, a powerful EF2 tornado, winds up to 120 miles per hour.
It was just unbelievable, like in Massachusetts, this happening.
It is the first tornado ever confirmed in that county.
And in Venice Beach in Southern California, as you mentioned, one man was killed and at least 13 others were injured by extremely rare lightning. Witnesses reported 4 direct lightning strikes on the beach. That almost never happens.
On the weekend, in the middle of summer beach season out here in LA, just amazing.
I know, especially because it almost never rains in July, and here we had lightning.
In the meantime, I'm hearing from all of these people in the Midwest who are usually sweltering right now with horrible humidity in the middle of July and August. And they're telling me it's cool, beautiful, 40% humidity. Something strange is going on, and maybe it's that climate change you've heard so much about.
In other news,
aside from the environmental impact, this is going to affect anyone on the East Coast whose job relies on fishing or tourism.
The Obama administration will allow the oil industry to use sonic cannons to look for oil and gas beneath the sea floor off the Atlantic coast. It is the next step before opening up the region to offshore drilling. Conservation biologist Dr. Reese Halter tells Ed Schultz on MSNBC that this will severely harm thousands of marine animals like endangered whales.
It shatters their eardrums. They experience the most excruciating death possible. These cannons are going to kill thousands of dolphins and whales. They're going to maim hundreds of thousands of whales.
And I'd also like to note that whales, dolphins, and other marine animals did not respond to requests for comment.
No one ever asked the whales or dolphins for their opinions.
Nope, they never do. In Colorado, a federal judge has struck down a voter-approved ban on fracking within the city limits of Longmont, Colorado. The judge said, quote, "The citizens' sincerely held beliefs about risks to their health and safety conflicted with state law and the state's interest in developing oil and gas deposits." Longmont is just one of hundreds of towns fighting to put limits on the explosion of oil and gas drilling within their borders.
So the citizens voted against fracking, local control, which, by the way, is what Republicans always claim is the most important type of control, and now the big government state is overriding them. I imagine Republicans are furious about that?
No, they're not. They're siding with the state and the oil and gas industry lawsuits.
Imagine that.
But some good news. After a grassroots consumer campaign organized by Oxfam, food and beverage giant General Mills has announced a corporation-wide initiative to cut its greenhouse gas emissions and will require the same from its global suppliers as well. And it's probably self-serving because grain prices are already spiking due to extreme weather around the world.
Yeah, I always knew that General Mills was a good guy.
Moving on. Rocker Neil Young has thrown his weight behind a new Kickstarter campaign from the group Rainforest Connection to fight illegal logging in the Amazon rainforest that will allow the trees to call for help, literally.
We use old, recycled smartphones that we hide in trees to listen for the sound of destruction. The moment one of our devices detects the sound profiles of chainsaws or other problems, an alert is sent to local rangers who can intervene in real time and halt the logging.
Rainforest Connection says a test project in Indonesia worked on the first day to stop illegal loggers in the act.
So the whales and dolphins aren't talking to us, but the trees are.
Yep.
Can we talk back to them?
Unless you speak tree, not yet.
For much more on those stories and a whole bunch we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves. Download us anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, and find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
I talk to the trees, but they don't listen to me. I talk to the stars.
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Decent days, quality is in play. Workers should organize without haste. Have the vote in your workplace. Work with your manager face to face. Let's go! It's starting again. The change, a new labor rate. Support the EFCA. Let's go! It's starting again.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Lots of ways to interact with the program. You can go to our Facebook page or Twitter, at Rick Smith Show, or you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Interesting story. Remember the whole Hobby Lobby thing? Which, again, to me, I'm hastens the destruction of employer-based health care. Maybe we decide that, we don't actually need all of the interference, all of the nonsense that has come out because of this Hobby Lobby case. It turns out, and you knew these stories were going to pop up. The family values people over at Hobby Lobby. Turns out they fired a woman a couple years back, 3 years ago, when she had the audacity to apply for medical leave to deliver her baby. She was a part-time cashier at the Flowood, Mississippi Hobby Lobby. I guess she was 4 months pregnant with their third child, and she went and applied for a job. They hired her. No, I would assume knowing. And she said, I need to do this. They told her, sorry, you don't qualify under federal law, because if you have to put in so many hours before you qualify for family medical leave. But according to her, one of the supervisors there at Hobby Lobby said, don't worry about it. You come back, you'll have your job. Well, turns out she was canned and told that she could always reapply at some point in the future. But that she was fired. Now, she went around to all of her, coworker friends and, other supervisors, basically, can they do this? And everyone's like, no, and indignant. They can't possibly. No, that's wrong. Well, guess what? They can. Is what it is. So then you look at a lot of this stuff and you go, well, wouldn't this be something that we should, as family values type people, we should be holding these companies accountable for? Now, there are a number of things here, but I mean, especially the Hobby Lobby people who say that they're they have these family values, they're good Christian people, love the children. Just kind of makes you wonder. Another piece of legislation was put forth back middle of July, I think July 22nd, by Representative George Miller of California and Delorio from Connecticut, along with Senator Harkin and Warren. This idea of a Schedules That Work Act is what they're calling it. It would say, you know what, you've got to give people some idea of what kind of a schedule they're going to have at work. And, you know, I was thinking about this, you know, because I was talking to the woman earlier from the National Women's Law Center. And, you know, it had come up that, you know, women are the ones most affected by the low wage economy. And really, you start looking at this, it's a very uncertain economy. And this whole push toward this Schedules That Work Act is to make sure that that workers have some say. Now, you remember Republicans wanted the Flexibility Act. Do you remember this? They wanted workplace flexibility, which means employers wouldn't have to pay overtime anymore. If they had work this week and there was 80 hours worth of work, you could work 80 hours without any overtime, and they would just promise at some point in the future when it suited that they would give you time off. It didn't give the employee any rights, any way to say that, you know, I'd like this time off, none of that. The idea of this legislation is to say, you know what, if you've got, you know, sick kids stuff, if you've got things coming up in the future, that you can make some plans. Because what they're saying is that, you know, workers who say, you know what, I need next Tuesday off, or I need this, or they change their availability in some way or limit the time that they're available. What studies have shown is that what ends up happening is they end up getting their hours cut. And there's nothing legally that you can do about it. And I go back to this whole idea of organizing at the workplaces so that you have a mechanism in place to say, you know what, you can't do this. There's got to be some workable relationship. There's got to be some ground where you sit down and you work this stuff out so that you have a better life-work balance. Because, you know, I saw something the other day that said 70% of workers in this country, 70% say that they have work-life balance conflicts, that those things are getting out of control. And you go, what does that mean, Rick? Well, it means, you know, if I want to go to my kids' functions, I want to go to my kids' parent-teacher conference. If I want to do some of these, you can't get time off from work to do it. And, you know, to me, right now I've got 3 kids, and I've got probably about another 10 years to where my kids are really going to give a rat's behind. And it's that very minimal amount of time that you get with your children. And, you know, as I get older, I realize that those moments, they don't ever get back. You don't get a second chance at the first day of kindergarten. You don't get a second chance at graduating from, you know, 3rd grade or whatever. You don't get those moments back. The first time your kid scores a basket, or the first time they score a goal, or what, you don't get those times back. And, you know, as I get older, I realize that, and this has been a struggle for me, because I've always been a chronic workaholic. You know, having grown up in poverty, having grown up in the projects, I've always been that guy that, overtime, oh yeah, I'll take all the overtime you give me. I'd work 60, 70 hours a week. And as I get older, I realize that, you know, to be honest, you get one shot at this. And there should be a way for people who want it. Look, if you want to work 70, 80 hours a week, you want to work 100 hours a week, God bless you. You know, do what you got to do. But for the rest of society who says, you know what, we put in our 40 hours and we spend it the rest of the time with our families. That's important. Now, with the Scheduling Act, the other part of it is, you know, and I've been through this a number of times, especially when at the beginning of my work career, because I worked at a trough, one of those buffet places, and I worked at a fast food place, and they would schedule a day at a time. Well, okay, you'll come back tomorrow at this time. We'll talk about the day after. Oh, call us. We might need you. And you go, what? What if I want to get another job? Well, you can't. Now that happened to me as well when I got into the trucking world too. We were on call at a 2-hour notice, but the difference is when I got called to work, you're making probably somewhere around $35 an hour. Huge difference between that and $3.35. But, you know, I digress. This would say no more of that. This would say if you're going to have changes in schedule, there's going to be some penalty. If you're going to have this one day at a time kind of thing, there's got to be some benefit for the employee. And I'm wholly in favor of that. I think it's a great idea. But here again, what I like about what's going on is Democrats are finally waking up to the reality that they've got to say, hey, this is who we are. We're going to stand with working people. We're going to stand for workers' rights. We're going to actually put forth some legislation, even if it doesn't pass, solely to begin that conversation and to say, hey, we've got to move in the right direction. So I'm pretty happy about this. Let's take a quick break. Right back.
Anyone who works full-time ought not live in poverty, period. Raising the minimum wage above the poverty level is not a question of economics, even though it would be a big plus for our economy, but a question of morality. Who are we as a people, a nation, especially in the richest nation in the world, if we dishonor the work ethic with a wholly unethical wage floor? It's disgraceful, which is why 3 out of 4 Americans support raising the floor, including a majority of Republicans. Yet, the wage stays stuck at the unconscionable level of $7.25 an hour because Republican leaders are stuck on the low-wage dogma dictated by corporate elites. At a forum in April, GOP Congress creditor Dennis Ross of Tampa was confronted by a fast food worker who asked him to support a minimum wage hike. "Who's going to pay for it?" snapped Ross, who's paid $174,000 a year by us taxpayers. A person in the audience rose to say he would gladly pay a little more for a hamburger so workers could be paid a decent wage, a comment that prompted applause from the crowd. Yet Ross railed against the very idea of a minimum wage. Quote, "If the government's going to tell me how much I can get paid, then we have a serious problem in this country." Yes, we do have a serious problem, and its name is Dennis Ross. Or let's call it Lamar Alexander. The Republican senator from Tennessee said of the minimum wage, "I do not believe in it." Indeed, he believes in the immorality of letting executive suite kleptocrats set sub-poverty pay scales to impoverish America's workforce. Or how about John Boehner, the GOP Speaker of the House, who's gone operatic on the issue, declaring that he would, quote, "commit suicide before I vote to raise the minimum wage"? This is Jim Hightower saying, these guys aren't just out of touch, they're nuts.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
So it appears, if you look at Detroit, it appears that actually collective activity, that people getting together and taking to the streets actually works. If you look at what's going on in Detroit, because on Tuesday, the czar, the king, Kevin Orr, gave control of the municipal water department back to the city of Detroit's mayor. Now, what they're saying is this may bring some relief for people who are about to have their water shut off. In fact, you've had tens of thousands of people who have already seen their water shut off over the last several months. And it was supposedly over the next 60 days or so, there was going to be upwards of another 3,000 or 4,000 more who are going to be added to that list. Now, the whole idea was, of course, was to make the water authority, the water department, look profitable so that they could sell it off. And I've talked, for years about this idea that what we're seeing is water going to be the oil of the next generation. And I saw an article today. The headline read, "Companies proclaim water the next oil in a rush to turn resources into profits." It doesn't take a genius to figure this out, that when you have something that your life depends on, oil you could probably get around. We could figure out, if we really wanted to, alternative energy. I don't know that we're going to be able to figure out how to exist without water. Considering that your body can only go, so long without it, I'm not quite sure that we're going to be able to figure it out. Maybe some point down the road they'll figure out an antifreeze kind of situation where your body doesn't sweat it out and it just stays circulating. I don't know. But what's interesting to me is you're seeing these companies now outwardly saying that water is the resource of the next generation. And it's what Wall Street's going to be doing. And look, as I said, you look at other countries who have had their water supplies privatized and, of course, profitized. And I've said for years, it's coming here. So I look at Detroit, where they were shutting water off for thousands of people who couldn't afford to pay the bill, that kept going up and up and up, even though the water in the lake right there, it's there. It's just when they put it in pipes, it seems to cost a lot of money, which made me start to think, what if all of those people went to the lake with buckets and started taking water out of the lake and boil it in their house, and like they do in third world countries? Because eventually that could happen if half the city can't afford to pay the water bill anymore. What happens? Do you end up with water refugees? Do we end up with people going to the lake with buckets? And then, if you privatize it, the question becomes, legally, are you going to put people at the lake with guns to make sure that nobody takes the water out because we've privatized it? This is the kind of world that we're moving toward. And this scares the hell out of me. We're moving towards this world of everything is for a profit motive, and if you can't afford it, pay or die. That's the mantra of the future: pay or die. The conservatives want it with healthcare. They want it with resources. This is the mentality. Go to the park. If you can't pay, you can't go. All of this privatization. You want to go across town? Sorry, if you can't afford the tolls, you can't go. I ran into a situation over the weekend where I drive a truck on the weekend, just to kind of to stay into it and to make a couple extra bucks to put in my kids' college fund. But I ran into this situation where I realized too late that the truck that I was in didn't have an Easy Pass. And I didn't have any money on me. So I had to figure out, okay, a very twisted way to get where I was going in New Jersey without going over the toll roads. And it really popped into my head going, this is where we're heading. This is the direction we're moving in, where, you've got the right to move around, but if you can't afford it, what are you going to do? Think about this. Think about where conservative ideology is taking us. This idea that everything is privatized. There's nothing to be held by we the people. And I'm telling you, this is where we're going. You want to go to a park? You better dig deep. You want to go across town? You better dig into a pocket. You want to just go look at flowers on the hillside? You better take some money out of your pocket. This is where we're going. I mean, I brought up, where I live. You want to go to the community pool and just, as a resident or non-resident, it's like, for me, we're a non-resident. It's like $50 for the kids to go, which is obscene. When I was a kid, it was free. You would go into the pool in our local community. It was free, and then it was like 50 cents. You had to buy a pass for like 50 cents. Now, because of all of the tax cuts and all of that stuff, conservative world is moving us towards everything's pay for play. If you don't have it, tough luck, buddy. I don't think that's a good way to go. I just don't, especially when you're looking at something like water. So I'm curious, thoughts. Are we going to see water refugees? Is that next? Amazing, amazing stuff. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The City of Los Angeles says it will appeal a ruling by the city's Employee Relations Board rescinding $4.3 billion in unilateral pension cuts imposed on new hires. The Employee Relations Board ruled it was an unlawful cut made without collective bargaining. Cheryl Parisi is AFSCME District Council 36 Executive Director and also Chair of the Coalition of LA City Unions.
We hope that the city makes a decision to abide by the law and abide by the ruling of the city's Employee Relations Board. That is our hope, rather than reverting to the courts.
Parisi says that the unions reopened their contract a couple of years ago and agreed to pay more out of pocket for their pensions, but the city then unilaterally imposed new pension changes on new hires, arguing they have the legal authority to do that without bargaining.
We thought it was a false legal theory and challenged that the Employee Relations Board. And ultimately, after months of hearings and review, the hearing officer issued her report, and the Employee Relations Board upheld that report and found that, in fact, changes to the pension plan were a mandatory subject of bargaining because the pension plan was adopted in violation of the law, ordered that the terms of the prior pension plan be reinstituted.
The unions are currently in contract negotiations with the city. The unions represent some 20,000 Los Angeles city workers. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is on a mission to cut the pensions of public workers there, but complete details on what he wants to do haven't yet been made public. Raising the retirement age for public workers again, as he did in 2011, is one thing he wants to do. Despite signing a law to require the payments, Christie shortchanged the public pensions system by $2.4 billion in promised payments this year. Christie claims New Jersey might end up bankrupt, like Detroit, as he put it, if the state is forced to honor its legal obligation to pay pensions already earned by public workers. Hetty Rosenstein is New Jersey Director for the Communications Workers of America.
These are not Cadillac benefits. These are modest pension plans that are being paid for between 55 and 65% by the employees themselves, by their contributions. These payments are very large for the state to make. We can't deny that. But by not making the payments, they're making them larger.
The Wisconsin governor's race is in a dead heat as Democrat Mary Burke takes on Wisconsin's union-busting governor Scott Walker. So if Burke is able to unseat Walker, what does that mean for public worker collective bargaining rights in Wisconsin? Burke told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel she supports, quote, the right of public employees to collectively bargain and will work to restore that right, end quote. She says the employee out-of-pocket contributions to health care and pension plans that are in the Anti-Union Law, Act 10, could have been achieved through collective bargaining. If elected governor of Wisconsin, Burke says she would work to repeal parts of Act 10, like annual union recertification elections and the ban on automatic dues collections. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
There are many employers that say, we're looking for people, but we can't find anybody that has passed the drug test, a lot of them. And that's a concern for me because we're having a serious problem with that.
I messed up my entire life because I got high. I lost my kids and wife because I got high. Say what, say what, say what, say what. Now I'm sleeping on the sidewalk and I know why. Why, man? Yeah, because I got high. Because I got high. Because I got high.
That's what Corbett and the Scott Walkers of the world, Scott Wagners of the world would believe. We've got the fourth slowest growing economy in the country, according to the investor class's newspaper, the Wall Street Journal. All because, as Governor Corbett said there, all those people who can't find jobs, they're all just evidently can't pass a drug test. Seems very odd to me. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Recently, Senator Dalen Leach found his way out to Colorado to take a look at the drug trade out there. And I thought, well, it'd be interesting to talk to him, see what he learned in his trip to Denver. So I've asked Senator Leach on the program. Dalen, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be with you, Rick.
So what'd you learn out in Colorado about everybody stoned and nobody working and everything, society falling apart? Is that what we found out?
Yeah, pretty much. I was surprised. No, in all seriousness, and we went out there, me and some of my staff members, because I think if you look at the polls and you look at the arc of history, it's pretty clear that legal marijuana is going to be coming to Pennsylvania fairly soon. And the stakes are extremely high in terms of whether we do it the right way or the wrong way.
Right.
And it's a very complicated issue. So we went out to Colorado to see what they're doing. They're the first state that has full legalization. What have they done right? What have they done wrong? What could we do better? And what can we learn from them? And so we went out there. We spent 3 days. We toured, every kind of facility. We toured grow facilities, several of them. We toured processing facilities, dispensaries, which are like stores, laboratories where they test for potency and impurities, and marketing centers, law enforcement. The National Conference of State Legislators has their headquarters out there. We met with them on legislative trends generally around the country on this issue, and so I think we immersed ourselves and I think got a very comprehensive view, and I think we've learned an awful lot, which will be very valuable when we actually get around to getting rid of this insane prohibition policy we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, I think the vast majority of people are in favor of at least medical marijuana almost immediately, if my sense is correct.
Right. According to the Pew poll, 85% of Pennsylvanians support access to medicine for people who need it. But a national poll, a national Gallup poll recently had 59% of people nationally supporting ending prohibition entirely. And when you go to Colorado, you see why. The fact is that their economy is booming as a result of this. They're making tons of money, not only in terms of tax revenue for the state, but all these new businesses, whether directly or indirectly related to the industry, and people not being arrested. It was very interesting. People at one point, someone was handing me something to take a look at, and it was sort of a public place, and I thought, you have this instinct like, oh my God, don't do this here, we're going to get arrested, but it's legal, and it's just it's a whole different world. And to your sort of facetious point in the beginning, one of the things we wanted to do was look at how the society is reacting, how the culture is reacting. Is everyone stoned all the time? In fact, no. In fact, productivity is not. There's no decrease in productivity or absences from work. There is a decrease in crime. There's a decrease in traffic accidents, actually, and they think that's because fewer people are drinking and they're smoking instead. And smoking, while no one wants anyone smoking while intoxicated, is less dangerous than drinking. And so, so far, every societal impact virtually seems to be positive. There were a few things they did that were wrong, and that have to be addressed. For example, they were one of the big part of the industry is edibles. You put marijuana in a brownie or a cookie, and they had a lot of things that would be appealing to kids. Candy that was packaged like candy, and you had incidents where kids got into it and had, and no one died from it, but had unpleasant experiences because of that. So they're now starting to use child-proof packaging and more adult packaging, just to make it clear what it is. And so that's one of the lessons you learn.
Maybe at some point in the future they'll make bottles of liquor, because I think a lot of kids, their first experience with liquor was by accident. Hey, what's this? And they didn't have child-proof caps on those.
Well, yeah, I don't know. They do have drinkables too. There, they have, they look sort of like Budweiser bottles, and it's extremely sophisticated. Just so people know, this is not a group of hippies who are like, we've been selling it in our dorm for a while. Now that it's legal, we'll just open a store. First of all, they have a concept out there called vertical integration, where if you sell it, you also have to grow it, you also have to process it. So it requires a good bit of change, a good bit of money to invest to even get started. And the people who aren't serious, who don't know what they're doing, are quickly gone out of business. And the ones who are, who do know what they're doing, are making a ton of money, and they're responsible people. They're, some of them are in their 60s and 70s. They're doing it the right way. And so far, everyone that we spoke to out there seems to feel very positively about it, even people who were skeptical at first.
Well, I would put myself in the skeptical position. I'm in favor of decriminalizing. My fear of legalizing is that, I look at what, the big tobacco companies have done with cigarettes. My fear is that you end up with a product down the road that is highly addictive, even if you can argue that it's not addictive now. My fear is that at some point, if you give it to corporate America, they figure out how to make it highly addictive, and you end up with a bigger problem down the road. I'm curious if that's been addressed out there.
Well, I'll say a couple things about that. First, the problem with merely decriminalizing is that there's no way to get it. That's legal. So you're still buying it behind the bowling alley.
Right.
And the problem with that is you don't know the potency. You don't know that it's not laced with some other product. You don't know that it's safe. There's no regulation that way. In Colorado, it's highly regulated. Everything you buy has a label with the potency and, a certification that's been tested for mold. It's been tested for all kinds of impurities. So you're getting a safe product. It's also, you can buy it in, a well-lit store in a strip mall rather than, again, going, behind the bowling alley or, down by the docks or something like that. So I think there's a lot of advantages to legalizing it.
And maybe here in
I'm sorry. I was going to say, the second thing I was going to say is just Colorado has not had the problem you're describing yet. That doesn't mean they won't. The reason they haven't is because there's only 2 states that have it legally yet, and it's not yet worth it for the big corporations to come in. If you have 30 states legalizing it, you could have Philip Morris or RJR Reynolds coming in, and we do have to be very careful about that. Because we don't want them adding things into it to make it addictive and so forth. That's something we just have to keep vigilant about and make sure that we keep legislatively on top of it to prevent that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's my one fear. But from here in Pennsylvania, if we were to do it, I'm a fan of putting it into the state stores, because there's a network already built in right there that we would benefit from it.
That's my bill. We already have a structure which is used to dealing with an intoxicant, used to collecting taxes, used to checking ID. And so, we could plug into that initially. In Colorado, they have a totally different system. It's a, purely private system. And, I'm not married to any particular approach. I just thought the path of least resistance would be to plug into the already existing infrastructure, at least in the beginning,
right.
in Pennsylvania, for recreational. Medical, under my legislation, is handled differently. There's special dispensaries for that. In Colorado, the dispensaries do both medical and recreational. They divide them up within the store. They have one counter for this and one counter for the other, but they're in, everything is under one roof.
It sounds interesting. It'll be interesting to see where this goes in the coming months as your bill continues through and as we continue to talk about it. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Pennsylvania State Senator Dalen Leach. I wanted to ask you about the pension stuff that's going on and the governor's veto of a portion of the budget. I wanted to get your sense of it because I look at this pension problem, and I don't even know that's as big a problem as it's being blown out to be, but I saw Lieutenant Governor Cawley give a speech the other day, and he was standing behind a podium that in bold letters said property tax relief through pension reform. And to me, immediately I'm thinking we're dividing 2 groups of people that the governor has actually harmed in both ways, because property taxes have gone up because of the massive cuts to education spending, and now he wants to take it out of the teachers and the cops and the firefighters. It just seemed very ironic to me.
No, you're right. And people should know. I mean, there have been pension problems, but there's a few things people should know about the pension problem. Number one, the recipients of the pensions are the one group of people, the workers, teachers, the state workers. They're the one group of people who have kept their end of the bargain. They have paid their share of the pension contribution every time, every step of the way. The people who've broken their word are the state, who has repeatedly not met their obligation, not paid what they're supposed to pay. Ironically, we just saw in New Jersey this week, Governor Christie, who promised to never short the pension plan there again, has to break that, or wants to break that promise. And you may have seen, he said, "Welcome to the real world.
Right.
I broke a promise." But that's the sort of attitude that's just so destructive. If we had kept our end of the bargain, and we wouldn't have the pension crisis. So putting the entire burden of fixing the pension crisis on the people who met every obligation they had seems unfair. We passed something called Act 120 last session, which should address the pension problem as long as we continue to make the payments that we're supposed to make. So anything we do beyond that, everything Governor Corbett wants to do is not based on fixing the pension problem fiscally. It's ideological.
Right.
They just don't like people getting retirement benefits. That's socialism to them or something like that. And so they want to do everything they can to reduce those benefits. But it has nothing to do with the health. In fact, what he's proposing costs money. Will make the problem worse in the short term. It will save money down the road theoretically, but it doesn't take effect for old employees. It only takes effect for new employees. So if it went into effect today, it would only start affecting employees who were hired tomorrow, who are probably not going to retire for 30 years. So in 30 or 40 years, we might start seeing some savings by not giving them a decent retirement. But we're not going to do anything today. It's not going to help anything in the short term. And so it's just completely irrational what the governor wants to do.
Yeah, every time I talk about this, I'm reminded of the guy from the Competitive Enterprise Institute who testified before I think it was a Senate hearing a couple of years back about this, who said that going to a defined contribution plan is not going to save money. In fact, it could actually cost considerably more money than maintaining the defined benefit plan. But in his view, ideologically, it was the right thing to do. Therefore, even though it's going to cost more for taxpayers, even though it's going to bring a lower benefit for the workers, it was, in his view, ideologically the right thing to do.
And that's exactly Governor Corbett's position. People should understand why it will cost more. Currently, under a defined benefit plan, I put money into the plan today while I'm working, and it goes to pay people who are retired today, okay? But under a defined contribution plan, it's essentially turned into a 401k, which means that I have my own individual account, which means the money I'm putting in today does not go to pay current retirees. It just goes to my individual account. The problem is we still have to pay those current retirees under contract, contractual obligation. So somehow we've got to come up with hundreds of millions of dollars that we don't have to pay current benefits. And that's why it's so expensive to do it.
So let me ask you last question I've got for you. This veto of a certain portion of the General Assembly's budget, and what appears to be some infighting with the Republicans. There's some talk that the Republicans in the Senate may be suing the governor and all this stuff. This not good for we the taxpayers, not good for we in the Commonwealth at all, in my view.
There's so many reasons it's not good, and they're sort of complicated. And on the surface, the average person is like, good, cut the legislature. But let me tell you why it's a bad thing. What he did was cut our reserves. Why do we have reserves? We have reserves so in case there's a budget crisis and the governor and us can't agree, the legislature can continue to function. They can continue to pay the legislators, continue to pay the staff, etc. Why is that important? Because if you can't do that, that gives the governor almost dictatorial power. If the governor can say to you, unless you vote for my horrible budget, you're not going to be able to pay your mortgage, and you're going to have to dismiss all of your staff, and they're not going to be able to pay their rent or their mortgage, you're going to have a situation where it's untenable. People are going to be, voting for bad things in order to preserve their own life. We don't want to give that. We don't want to make it so legislators have a personal stake in any bill, because when you do that, all kinds of bad things happen. First of all, if it's a bad budget and you're my constituent, you want me to vote against it. You don't want me to have to vote for it in order to feed my family, number one. Number two, if let's say I'm a rich legislator, I can hold out for months. I'm independently wealthy, but the legislator next door is living, paycheck to paycheck. He can't do that. So it creates an imbalance in the legislature. Now, these are subtle points, but in terms of the balance of powers and separation of powers, it is a terrible idea to give the governor that much leverage over the legislature. We should be voting on bills based on whether they're good or bad bills, not based on whether or not we can afford to oppose or support a bill.
That's an excellent point. And I guess you guys are going to be coming back next. I know the House is back next week. Is the Senate back in session as well?
I don't know. We've not been notified of that. I've heard rumors. If the House changes something, we may have to come back either next week or the week after to address that. But it's unclear, and we'll just wait to hear. I just don't know for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. And if you are back, we'd love to have you come back and tell us what's going on.
Happy to do that anytime, Rick.
Thanks so much, Senator Leach. Great talking with you. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more kindness than fury. No more disarray. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for the world in two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. Argentinian officials are meeting with a court-appointed mediator in New York today to try and strike a deal that would prevent the country from defaulting on its national debt for the second time in 12 years. At the tail end of Argentina's financial crisis in the early 2000s, its sovereign bonds sold for cheap on international markets. By 2005, cash-strapped Argentina proposed a debt restructuring to those bond investors. Many accepted the deal, but a portion of investors are still holding out.
There are still about 8% of the bondholders that have never been satisfied with 25 or 30 cents on the dollar. They want to be paid much closer to the face value of the debt that they hold. And they've been pursuing Argentina in the courts since 2005 in New York.
Brett House teaches economics at McGill University and is an expert in sovereign debt restructuring at the Center for International Governance Innovation. In June, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear out an Argentinian appeal to delay paying its creditors, leading to the countdown to potential default on Thursday.
Argentina has to pay those holdout creditors at the same time as it makes payments on the restructured debt. If it doesn't do both, then it's in essentially a default situation and in contempt of court.
Argentina's remaining creditors are often referred to as vulture funds, the suggestion being that they prey on poor countries or are unreasonable in resisting settlement. But House says the term distorts the reality of a healthy sovereign debt market, in which both lender countries and investors balance risk and reward.
No one forced Argentina to borrow money on international capital markets. For them to walk away from the obligations that they willingly undertook is deeply inappropriate.
Whether Argentina defaults or strikes a last-minute deal, you'll hear about it here. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Salvatore Calalori. On Fox & Friends, co-host Brian Kilmeade suggested that President Obama is trying to bait Congress into impeaching him by overreaching on the implementation of immigration policies. Co-host Steve Doocy then used this opportunity to make the following claim.
Brian, to your point about impeachment, only Democrats are talking about it. Republicans, conservatives, not talking about it. Only Democrats. It's to gin up the base before November.
Yet just a few weeks earlier, following the Obama administration's deal to secure the release of American service member Bo Bergdahl from the Taliban, Fox News legal analyst Andrew Napolitano sat adjacent to Doocy on Fox & Friends and endorsed calls for impeachment.
Andy McCarthy, a friend of this program who's got a new book out, he said yesterday...
He says the president should be impeached for this.
That's what he does say. He says it's crimes and misdemeanors.
In my view, it's a very, very valid argument that people are going to start talking about.
For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and exile. Those are the nations of the world today.
Got an email during the break asking about water and the resources, and asking about the Colorado River, and as I've brought up in the past, Lake Lanier down there in the Florida, Alabama, Georgia area, where as I've said a number of times, a couple of years back, there was talk of actually sending the National Guard from each state to guard the water, so that, if I remember right, Atlanta had been taking more than they were agreed to, or whatever the story was. But I do see at some point that you never know. We could end up devolving into a nation that's fighting over water resources within our own country, and it's interesting to me that we're seeing this privatization of all of our resources, and it's kind of dumb to me, really, honestly. It's really very dumb to me. And you look at the guy who is the chairman and former CEO of Nestle Corporation, one of the largest water companies in the world. And as he put out, in his view, we the people, we don't have an automatic right to more water than is required to survive, unless you can pay for it. You don't deserve it. Now, as the World Health Organization puts it, the survival level, minimum survival level of water is 20 liters per day for basic hygiene and food. More if you want to wash your clothes or take a bath. Here in the U.S., flushing the toilet consumes about 50 liters of water a day, according to reports. Now, this idea that you're not entitled to more than basic survival, and you look at this 20 liters a day, which isn't an awful lot. Sometimes just brushing your teeth is for most people is more than that. Now, look, I do understand there's got to be some way to make sure that we're not wasting, that there's a conservation part of this, but the idea that anything above and beyond bare substance, and even in D.C. they're talking about shutting it, or in Detroit, talking about shutting it off. So that idea of just basic needs isn't even there. But then you go beyond that, and it's a for-profit model. It's scary to me. It scares me beyond existence to think that as we're polluting our waterways, and as we're allowing our natural resources to be harmed, then we're turning to these places that have their own water reserves privatized that we're going to have to pay for. It's scary stuff, I think. And it's stuff that I don't really think very many people put much time or thought into. And that's kind of worrisome. This idea that this ticking bomb is out there. This I'm not going to use the word tsunami because that's water, but this crisis, this ticking bomb that most people, and people like me, are going to suffer from. And it'll be interesting to see where this takes us. And because I go back and I look at like Bolivia, for instance. If you go back to them at the beginning of the 2000s, they had privatized their entire water system. And the reason I brought up Detroit and people going to the lake with buckets, in Bolivia, Bechtel had bought their water supply, and you weren't allowed to even put out a little bowl when it rained, because that was considered their water. You couldn't put out a basin, you couldn't put out buckets, you couldn't put your clothes out on the line and squeeze the water out couldn't do any of that stuff. It was illegal, and you would be fined for it. And the cost of the water went up over 300% within a couple of years of Bechtel taking over. This is a well-documented screw job of consumers because you didn't have an alternative. Now, look, for where the free market, in my view, works is where people have options. If you're part of the free market, you've got the option to opt out. But when you're talking about a monopoly of a life-sustaining good, well, that's not something that should be in the purview of the free market. Just my thought. And I'm curious what your thoughts on the water, and I appreciate the email, asking the question and bringing it back into my head, because, as you look at this water situation, it's only going to get worse, especially in the Southwest, where they're right now in, major drought conditions, and a good portion of it. If we went to the Hoover Dam, and you see Lake Mead there, where there's this big ring around the tub, and my kids are like, "What's that?" I go, "That's where water used to be. For decades there was water there. That water's not coming back, and in fact, not only are we losing that water, we're losing the underground water table as well. All the while, you've got Nestle and others sucking water out of the ground to bottle and sell. You figure that out, because I'm struggling with it. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Stay alive.
Workers in the late 1930s began exerting their recently guaranteed right to organize and join unions. Millions of workers flocked to join the labor organization of their choosing to collectively bargain for better wages, hours, and working conditions. Factory, mill, and mine owners, not eager to embrace the changes, fought vehemently to deny workers their rights. As company tactics grew more heavy-handed and brutal, the workers' organizing methods changed. Sit-down strikes became a way for workers to demand their rights and to force management to listen. With a wave of a handkerchief, the tip of a hat, workers would shut down their machines, lay down their hammer, and sit down. Workers at the Hershey Chocolate Factory in Hershey, Pennsylvania, seeking to reduce the 60-hour-long work week, decided to form a union. Initially, an agreement was reached, but as the economy took a downturn, the company willfully violated the agreement by laying off the most senior workers, those who just happened to be the most ardent union supporters. The workers voted to strike the very next day. At 11 a.m. on April 2nd, 1937, a red handkerchief was waved and the workers began the first sit-down strike in Pennsylvania's history. The company reacted by forming the Loyal Workers Club. These strikebreakers consisted of hired thugs from New York City and local farmers, dairy producers, and shopkeepers who were dependent on the factory. On April 6, Hershey organized a loyalty parade. After hours of rallying speeches, the lathered-up Loyal Workers Club mob found pipes and clubs that had been manufactured at the Hershey planing mill. The angry mob headed to the Hershey factory to throw their strikers out. Songs of solidarity sung by the striking workers could be heard from inside the factory as the angry mob burst into the plant. Blocking the only exit, the Loyal Workers Club, loyal only to management and greed, began pummeling the workers as they tried to escape. The assault left numerous workers bloody and beaten, many unconscious. Within days, Hershey reopened and recognized a renamed version of the Loyal Workers Club. In May of 1938, the National Labor Relations Board ruled Hershey had violated the law and the company union was dissolved. Soon the workers joined the Bakery and Confectionery Workers Local 464, who have faithfully represented the workers ever since. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happy!
most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So have you signed up for Sarah TV yet? Oh, cannot wait for Sarah Palin TV. Or have you signed up for Reagan Book? I signed up for Reagan Book just so you don't have to. I cannot wait for the hilarity to begin. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Ellen Ratner, Talk Radio News Service. Ellen, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you. As your news person, I should be up on Reagan something, but I am up on Sarah Palin TV. But what's this other thing?
Reagan Book. It's the conservative Facebook. It's where patriots go and sign up so they can't be thrown off. And I'm waiting to see if they throw me off.
You're kidding.
No, there's like 60 people on it right now. I do expect, there to be a couple of thousand of the really crazy, of the most crazy. But yeah, they're rolling out Reagan Book.
Oh my gosh, that is just wild.
Well, it's the natural.
I can't believe though that Sarah Palin thinks she's actually going to make any money on this.
Somebody's got to be bankrolling her, and the other part of this is it's not going to be her because she doesn't want to do that kind of work. That's a lot of work.
As we know, everybody thinks of being a talk personality, all you have to do is get and talk. Right. They should only put all the hours of show prep in that you put in and others put in.
No, exactly. And, the reality is somebody had to come to her and say, we've got an idea. We want to use your name. That's the only way I see that. I don't see her going, I got an idea. That's not how this worked.
Yeah, I agree. Somebody did something.
Yeah, and it didn't come out of her head. Anyway, let's find out what's going on. Understand the big vote was supposed to happen, I guess about 5 o'clock today?
Yeah, it's supposed to happen. I have not seen the actual vote figures yet because it would just be coming out right this second. But it's Nancy Pelosi made a floor speech on this, and, that's not too often that she does that. So I just have no idea what is going to happen with that insanity. But, it's not going to – I don't know if the House is allowed to spend its own money or whether it has to go to the Senate. It would obviously die in the Senate. But I think the House might be able to spend its own money on that. I just don't know.
It just seems dumb to me. And, what I find comical about this whole charade is everyone knows that this is an attempt at, if not an actual impeachment, a charade of an impeachment. And to hear the Republicans, who for weeks have been going, we should be impeaching this guy, now saying, oh, we never said that.
Right, and of course, how do they start doing that when the record shows something very, very different?
Well, how many people, and nothing against you or others in the media, but how many people have actually asked them the question? I mean, I looked at Fox News, who kind of agreed with them. The story I saw this morning was, oh yeah, it was the Democrats who did this.
I'm speechless.
As you should be. As you should. But I'll bet you, you betcha on Sarah TV they'd had the truth.
I'm sure. I mean, is she going to do this from Alaska? I just can't see it.
As I understand it, she's got her own little setup there. I mean, there have been a number of interviews that they've done from her house, so she's got to have the equipment to link up. So I got to assume that's part of it, right?
Right. Although that equipment may belong to Fox News Channel, it may not. She may have bought it. I don't know.
Or somebody, I don't know. Actually, I don't know how many people are. You'll get the most ardent people to spend money on it, but I don't think you're going to, as much as I dislike Glenn Beck, I think he's actually done it right. I think they've spent a ton of money doing their thing, and it's all craziness morning to night, but I think it's done well.
Well, I mean, that's it. You have to be willing to expend the time and energy and have it your main focus.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go out throwing bombs here. Did you see her over the weekend? She did a speech, and I forget the name of the organization, but it looked like she was bombed. I mean, she not only did she bomb, but she looked like she was bombed.
Really?
Oh yeah, slurring her words, and you could tell she was reaching for stuff. You know, just it was kind of funny. If I find the clip again, I'll send it to you.
You have to send it to me. I can't imagine anything like that.
I thought it was. I looked at it and go, maybe this is one of those Rick Perry moments, where maybe she wasn't really. Maybe she took some painkillers or something. I don't know, but she looked it looked hysterical.
Really, that is just bizarre.
Well, maybe.
But you know, I rely on you for popular culture. What do I know? I interviewed Robert Redford once and had no idea who he was.
Well, I don't really know who Robert Redford was. I know he was an actor. I can't remember. Maybe a movie or two.
But then they told me he played in All the President's Men, and I actually heard of him.
Oh, okay. That is true. Now that you mention it. Well, I guess we're kind of in the same boat.
But yeah, right, exactly. And I'm older than you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, true.
You know, this is how old I am, and I know we're supposed to talk about news, but I got to tell you this. I went to the Ulster County Fair yesterday, and I found out that if I stay here on Thursday, which I'm not going to, I have to go to Washington later, that I could get in as a senior for free to a fair.
Oh, come on. All right, well, look, see, there are some benefits to getting older. And maybe you were around for the 49th anniversary of the signing of Medicare and Medicaid.
Well, actually, I was. And I remember where I was that day. I was actually in Memphis, Tennessee. And my father had died, my mother remarried a doctor, and all the doctors, these right-wing doctors from Memphis, were all upset about Medicare.
Yep.
I remember it as if it were yesterday.
No, I was just...
How's that?
It's good memory. You know, I wasn't alive then, but, you know, it's I'm glad it happened. But I remember I was just not too long ago, I was watching The Munsters. You remember that TV show, The Munsters?
I did, and I liked when they clicked. You know?
I was watching it with my kids because, you know, I think that's okay. And Paul Lynde was on talking about how bad Medicare was going to be and how horrible Medicare was going to be on The Munsters, and I go, wow, you know, a little bit of history right there.
Wow, they actually talked about it on television?
Well, I mean, he was a doctor and he woke up complaining, oh, this Medicare is going to be horrible, and they let him go on this, you know, like 35, 40-second rant about how horrible Medicare was going to be.
I can't believe it. That is just wild.
It's hysterical. Okay, let's find out what's going on around the world. Syria, what's going on in Syria?
Okay, well, Syria, the United Nations has actually said that they have spent a lot of money and that they are very worried about people. They have not been able to get to certain parts. And they say there's 3 million people in need of food, and of course South Sudan's going to be next place on the list because of the famine that they expect to happen soon. But so the United States is saying that they are going to give more support, and of course the United States went from sort of supporting the rebels to supporting the quote-unquote moderate rebels.
And what does that mean?
Well, it means that they don't want to support the whack birds. But how are you able to tell?
And that's what I mean. How do you decipher one from the other? I mean, to be honest, the whole region, and don't take this the wrong way, but for me, the whole region, how do you tell one from the other? And I think we stay out of the whole thing. If you humanitarian aid, one thing, but you know, picking, I don't know, not my thing.
Yeah, not my thing either. Okay, some other news that's going on, and there is a lot of news today and tomorrow, is the Veterans Benefit, a little pared down, but basically passed both houses. Well, it hasn't passed the Senate yet. It's expected to pass tomorrow morning. I think there were only 4 votes against it in the entire House. I don't know who those 4 are yet. But it's either 4 or 5 votes against the entire thing. So that passed with flying colors. So
we should see something come out of this?
Well, I'm hoping we do see something come out of this, yes.
You know,
we'll see.
As I talked about yesterday, you know, I look at the Sanders bill, and, you know, part of me says this is the beginning of the end of the VA. When you start saying we're going to start, you know, costing out some of these other things, to me it's the beginning of the end. And I got to be honest, I don't think I'm all that upset with it. I think if you know, we've got all of these different, you've got Medicare and Medicaid, you got the VA, you've got now Obamacare, you've got all these different things. I would like to see it come together to be one thing.
Well, that would be nice, and it would be. I don't disagree with you. But again, you're dealing with Congress.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unspeakable to me how these guys have really changed in the last 10 to 15 years. Really, we all thought C-SPAN was going to be great, putting everything in front of the American people, and it is good. But now what happens is that people, in fact, do, C-SPAN, et cetera, and then they perform for the cameras, and they don't get any work done.
No. And to be honest, the 24-hour news cycle where you've got all of these, like programs like this one, even trying to find things, the latest, juiciest topic to exploit. I don't do that, but I know a lot of places do, and I think that drives this as well. It's always conflict.
It is always conflict, and it is always speeches, and it is always, doing it for the home team, so to speak.
Yeah. What's going on over? I understand another school was hit over in Gaza.
Yes, another school was hit, and this is obviously in Gaza. This is the United Nations said it was one of their facilities, and I don't know what to make of it other than, look, should Israel get rid of the tunnels into Gaza? Absolutely. Should they be lobbing missiles over there? Absolutely not, in my view. And I think what they need to do is ask the United Nations to somehow get involved and to do whatever they possibly can to make sure that these schools are not hoarding missiles, and therefore the Israelis then would have no reason to bomb.
Now, I got to be honest.
Send in the blue hats, as I say.
Right, but I got to be honest. The PR that I've been seeing, not good for the Israelis. Nothing good there.
And that's why I think they have to take a very proactive view here.
Because I've had some conversations with friends who are generally on the side that Israel can do no wrong, and they're kind of going, I don't know, this doesn't seem right.
Well, when you go after civilians, it just makes people completely nuts, and it should.
Yeah. But there's the thing that gets me is my entire lifetime, that region has been in chaos. I don't know that there is an answer there.
Well,
and I guess that's been my point for a while.
It's interesting. My cousin, Aaron David Miller, was a Mideast negotiator for 25 years. As you know, he's constantly on TV.
Right.
Now a Wilson Center fellow. And he wrote that book, A Much Too Promised Land. And he basically says what needs to happen right now is there needs to be the United States needs to pull out, despite John Kerry's wishes to be the great savior here, the great hope. And the United States needs to pull out, and what they need to do is let the people in the area, the Egyptians, the Saudis, the this, that, the other, negotiate the deal. And I don't disagree with that.
Is that possible, though? I mean,
I think it's very possible, actually. I mean, Egypt had a deal on the paper. The Arab League has been meeting about this. So, yes, I think so.
Well, have we tried this before?
No, I don't. I think we've always tried to get our little nose under that tent, and I think it's a mistake. I think that is an area that, in some respects, you really kind of have to be there all the time.
Yeah, and I'm one of the people who say we need to stay out of other people's business. So that would be right in line with my thoughts. Okay, let's move along. I understand President gave a big speech today in Kansas City.
He did give a big speech today in Kansas City, and he really talked about what has happened in terms of the auto bailout, the other structures they put in place after the crash of 2008, and how, in fact, people's 401ks have come back. That this is the announcement today that the GDP is at 4% growth for the second quarter this year. That's really quite amazing.
Yeah, and the other thing that caught me is we're now the largest exporter, I guess, of oil. We're the number one.
Yes. Can you believe that? I mean, we actually, I was talking about Dubai to my brother at one point. My brother said, you should have looked at New York in the 30s, after the crash of 29 in the 30s and 40s, when we were the oil kings, and in fact, New York got built that way. And I might have my own issues about, not using solar, et cetera, but the fact is that we have now, we're getting to a point with all this oil that we are not so reliant on the Mideast, and that's probably a good thing.
That is a good thing, but here's my problem. If we're that guy, why are we sending it anywhere? Why am I paying $3.50, $3.75? Going through Indiana, it was like $4 a gallon. Why are we still paying these hyperinflated prices then?
Well, a lot of people are asking that, for sure.
I mean, if we're drill baby drilling,
that it sells on the open market. Oil is sort of fungible. It doesn't matter whether it's coming from here or there. Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. If we're going to be digging up our resources, maybe we ought to keep them.
I think I absolutely agree with you. And lastly, I understand there was a big hearing in the House, the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform.
Darrell Issa, yes, number 11 for Mr. Issa over there. And he's suggesting that the IRS commissioner go away and it be a board. Well, we all know how these boards go. The FCC is a board. The Federal Election Committee is a board. And because they have half Democrats and half Republicans, they never get anything done. Is that what we really want to have happen with the IRS?
Oh, that's what Issa wants.
That's right. Whatever Issa wants, he thinks he can get because he's so rich.
Yeah, well, I guess, but the thing that gets me is, all of this continuing going, oh, they're attacking conservatives, and we're going to, I think the title of it was something like ensuring that targeting never happens again or something like that.
Crazy.
And I'm going, but they didn't, that canard has been debunked every which way but Sunday, and yet they're still sticking to it.
He's a one-note Annie, and that's what's going to happen when when Newt Gingrich came in, they put in term limits to chairman. Well, he's not going to be chairman very much longer.
Good. All right, good. Bye. Ellen, great talk with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Anyone who works full-time ought not live in poverty, period. Raising the minimum wage above the poverty level is not a question of economics, even though it would be a big plus for our economy, but a question of morality. Who are we as a people, a nation, especially in the richest nation in the world, if we dishonor the work ethic with a wholly unethical wage floor? It's disgraceful, which is why 3 out of 4 Americans support raising the floor, including a majority of Republicans. Yet the wage stays stuck at the unconscionable level of $7.25 an hour because Republican leaders are stuck on the low-wage dogma dictated by corporate elites. At a forum in April, GOP Congress creditor Dennis Ross of Tampa was confronted by a fast food worker who asked him to support a minimum wage hike. "Who's going to pay for it?" snapped Ross, who's paid $174,000 a year by us taxpayers. A person in the audience rose to say he would gladly pay a little more for a hamburger so workers could be paid a decent wage, a comment that prompted applause from the crowd. Yet Ross railed against the very idea of a minimum wage. Quote, "If the government's going to tell me how much I can get paid, then we have a serious problem in this country." Yes, we do have a serious problem, and its name is Dennis Ross. Or let's call it Lamar Alexander. The Republican senator from Tennessee said of the minimum wage, "I do not believe in it." Indeed, he believes in the immorality of letting executive suite kleptocrats set sub-poverty pay scales to impoverish America's workforce. Or how about John Boehner, the GOP Speaker of the House, who's gone operatic on the issue, declaring that he would, quote, "commit suicide before I vote to raise the minimum wage." This is Jim Hightower saying, these guys aren't just out of touch, they're nuts.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Well, good news. The Consumer Financing Protection Board, headed up by Richard Cordray, the CFPB announced yesterday that 17,000 U.S. servicemen and consumers, they're going to get some debt relief. You remember talking about the schemes that were set up against our servicemen? They would set up these kiosks, right near the bases, pimping, computers and video game, all this high-priced, electronic stuff, no money down, immediate financing. We've heard all of these schemes before. We've talked about it being, really a huge, enormous scam. According to the CFPB, Richard Cordray, and 13 states attorneys generals, they have won an award of about $92 million in debt relief for these folks because these companies, and a couple of them are bankrupt, which is limiting the ability to get more of it, more money back. But they were fleecing service people. That's the bottom line. And now, after the fact, now you've got the one of them called Rome Financing. Their business model, according to Cordray, was set up on fleecing these folks. According to his statement, Rome Finance lured service members in with the promises of instant financing on expensive electronics, then masked the financing charges with inflated prices in marketing materials, and later withheld key information on monthly bills. He said today their long run of picking the pockets of our military has come to an end. And, I got to tell you, there are a number of industries set up just like that. So maybe Cordray, maybe you can go after them, the next group as well. Now, the hope is that this begins to snowball. Some of that stuff ends. Just a thought. But I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that there's money going to be able to help our service members who, sadly, we've not been taken care of. And as anyone knows, I'm not the biggest supporter of the military. I'm supporter of the troops, of the people who were sent into these situations and their families, absolutely. But it's the policies that got us into this stuff, not thrilled with. But absolutely, positively, unequivocally, we should be taking care of these folks. We shouldn't allow them to be getting screwed by financing schemes, payday lenders, and all of that stuff. And we certainly, when they're injured and need help, we should be there for them. So I'm hoping that the bill passes the Senate tomorrow and the president signs it, and quickly people get the help that they need. Anyway, the next couple of days, Thursday, Friday, Monday, taking a couple of days off. My wife and I are going to be celebrating our 14th wedding anniversary. It's amazing that she's put up with me this long. I'm shocked. I'm a lucky guy. But we're gonna go away, spend a little time together. She wants to see some comedians, so we're gonna go do that. We'll be back on Tuesday for the next couple of days. Going to play some of the best of programming, stuff that you may have missed from the past, stuff that important, but a little bit from the past, just to remind us of where we've been. But I'm looking forward to the weekend. Everybody needs a day or two to recharge, rejuvenate, re-energize, all of that stuff. And this is ours, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, if you've missed any portion of this program or any of our other programs, thericksmithshow.com, all of our podcasts right there, archived for the last 6 or 7 years. We've got there at the site. all right there for you to enjoy and be entertained by. Also, you can get our app, the Rick Smith Show app, there on your smartphone if you've got Google Play or iTunes. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you back here again. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.